Are you searching for the best in online black radio? Then go to blacktalkradionetwork.com, helping you filter through the noise. Real talk, black talk.
Context of white supremacy. Gus T Renegade and Justice in for another program to hopefully share constructive information on the system of racism, white supremacy. Our date for today is Monday, November 21st, 2011. I never in my wildest dreams thought we would begin a broadcast with 2 live crew. It has happened. Be prepared. Anything can happen. If you're a non-white person, that's what white supremacy means. Be prepared. At any rate, our guest for today's program, 818, she shared information about her book. She posted it on my Facebook page. Her book is titled The Everyday Language of White Racism. Real pleasure to have her on the program. She's now retired, but she's been Regents Professor of Anthropology and Linguistics at the University of Arizona. She's done extensive research on the relationship between language and white supremacy. Joining us live from Arizona. A few tech difficulties aside, should be constructive, Dr. Jane H. Hill.
All right, Dr. Hill, are you able to hear me?
Yes, now I can hear you. I really am sorry. Mr. Verizon's 3G just doesn't want to talk about racism, I guess.
I'm not surprised. Thank you for your patience. And again, thanks to the listeners for their patience. Dr. Hill, if you would like to share with our listening audience anything that you think would be constructive for them to know about you as we get ready to hop into our dialogue, please feel free.
Okay, well, I'm retired. And I used to teach I've been retired for a couple of years, and I taught at the University of Arizona for many, many years in the departments of anthropology and linguistics. And I'm actually a specialist in the language of Native Americans, but I'm very interested in linguistic and cultural issues, and sort of living my life as a white person in Arizona got me interested in the way that white racism was expressed through everyday talk, and that's what led to the book.
Outstanding. I too am interested in the way racism is manifested in just the way people use words every day. This program, the C.O.W.S, Context of White Supremacy, I have unfortunately concluded that we are in a global system dominated by racism, white supremacy. I use those two terms as synonyms, and I use the same definition for both terms. The definition I use is as follows: a global system of people who classify themselves as white and are dedicated to abusing and or subjugating everyone in the known universe whom they classify as not white. Do you believe that such a system exists, and do you think that's an accurate definition?
Yeah, I actually do, and in fact, that's how I reject in the book. I point out that the term racism isn't really usefully used for the prejudices of people of color, because the really striking thing about the system of white supremacy, and I don't know that I would use white supremacy and racism as synonymous, because I think there may have been other systems of racism in the history of the world, but to me, the striking thing about the system is how very, very widespread it is, and its immense power to move resources from people defined as people of color to the sector of people defined as white. Although, of course, not all people who define themselves as white benefit very much from that system, although they may think they do. So I think, we'd be largely in agreement.
Okay. Okay. I guess the only thing I would point out, I would say currently, 2011, I don't see any other functional form of racism besides white supremacy. That's why I think at this point it's most definitely correct to say that racism and white supremacy are synonyms. I don't see where any non-white person in the universe is capable of racism. Just to clarify that.
Well, I'm thinking of, these are not things that I know a great deal about, but I'm thinking, for instance, about discrimination against the so-called burakamine in Japan and so forth. But those are people who are not actually defined as inferior by the color of their skin. They're defined as inferior because of their ancestry within sort of folk Buddhism, as I understand it. But, not understanding systems like that as well as I do the white system of racism, as I say, I would perhaps want to say that there might exist at some historical periods other kinds of racism.
You talked about in the book that you grew up with, I'm going to use your words, unabashed racists for whom race was a preoccupation, even to the point of obsession.
Oh, yes.
Can you talk about this environment that you grew up in?
Well, my family was sort of, seemed like a perfectly normal middle-class family to me, and I think my parents were not very different from the parents of my friends. I'm 72. And I should say right away that my mother was not part of this system. This was really my father's family. And they came from Missouri, and my father and his brothers and his sister and the wives of his brothers, really this was one of their favorite topics of conversation. And after I got married, it just used to drive my husband crazy. He didn't even want, to go to my grandmother's to have to listen to this stuff. And I don't know what to say about it, except that they were they were strongly white supremacists. They felt very strongly that white people were superior in every way, and that if people of color enjoyed advantages, it was somehow undeserved, that they cheated to get it. And they also were very free users of terrible epithets that, I don't want to repeat on the air. But, all the usual repertoire that I'm sure most of your listeners will be familiar with. That was how they talked about people of color. Even though these were very educated people, they all, most of them had college degrees. And they simply, this was their strongly held ideology. But reflecting on it after many years, it was sort of the obsessive part, how much they liked to talk about it, and how often the conversation turned to this sort of thing. That was very striking. You're sort of breaking up again now.
Okay, am I coming in clear now?
Now you're good.
Okay. Just, I guess, for clarification, I don't really get offended by terms that people use. I think in the book you said that one of the slurs that they use, jig.
Oh, yes.
That was one of them. You're saying obsession. This was something that was talked about on a regular basis. I'm just trying to get an idea. Was it racist jokes? Was it upset about specific things that non-white people were doing?
No, it's interesting. It wasn't really, they didn't joke. I never heard any racist jokes from any of these people. The talk, a lot of it had to do with, for instance, how black people were moving into my grandmother's neighborhood, and she was terribly upset about it because she'd had to move twice in St. Louis to get away from black people, and now she'd have to do it again. And about, interactions with black people that they'd had that proved what they thought about them, that was the sort of thing that they talked about. They were very concerned that unless that they were constantly vigilant, that people of color would somehow get something they didn't deserve. But it's interesting that joking was not really a part of it. And it was all pretty clean, there wasn't any sexual joking or anything like that. After all, there were usually small children around when they were having this kind of talk.
That is interesting. So was this like an everyday thing for you, hearing these sort of, complaints about
No, I remember
black people?
mainly that it would happen when we would have, we all lived in the Los Angeles area, and we'd gather on weekends at my grandmother's house, and my grandmother would cook us all a nice dinner, and these conversations would start, And also, nobody drank, there was no drinking involved.
Wow. Very interesting.
Yeah, it was.
And I guess I'll just ask, do you think this was the sort of environment you grew up in? This is representative of how typical white families in America, regular comments, racist comments about non-white people, do you think your family experience is representative of what happens for most white people under the system of white supremacy?
I'm not sure. However, it was very interesting to me to read a book by Alberto Memmi, an Italian scholar of racism, where he talked about hearing this kind of conversation in his own background. I never heard it in anybody else's family. But, I was never part of large, intimate family gatherings for any family other than my own.
Interesting. I guess, and just trying to make the connection.
Also, I should say my mother's family was not like that. Certainly there were people in my mother's family who were racist, but they weren't like my father's family.
Okay. I've heard that before. I do think it's important to point out, because I've heard that from a lot of people where they've said one of their parents was explicitly racist, would either make jokes or comments and sort of thing that they made it very clear their stance on racism, white supremacy, non-white people. In my opinion,
my father absolutely insisted on it.
Hang on one second. Okay. Just in my opinion, if you got a racist parent, the other person, if they're in a marriage and they know that this person is racist, this person is making it very clear that they're racist, and you're hitched, you're in a marriage together, that person is complicit too, because you're co-signing, you're endorsing being with this person, endorsing this person's racist views, even if you say, I don't feel that way, or dad, that's just how they grew up, he was raised that way. For me, that does not cut it. I've heard that a lot, and for me, everybody would be indicted.
Yeah, well, my mother is dead and gone, and she was a fine lady, so but certainly there's truth in what you say.
Okay. Making the connection, because you start the book with that that information is in the preface. I think it's very important for the topic, because I think that family environment, it begins the dialogue on racism, white supremacy, and for the white children in the household, it begins their understanding of how they are supposed to function, behave, speak as a white person, really as a practitioner of racism, white supremacy. And I just want to use a quote from your book here. You say that linguistic anthropologists trace to France Boas and Benjamin Whorf their understanding that cultural ideas are most effectively encoded in discourse precisely when they are organized below the level of metalinguistic and metapragmatic awareness in unassailable presuppositions that are almost never made explicit. And even though what you talked about with your family, you said that, your father
were very
and maybe some other
yes.
members made very clear comments about, black people or non-white people getting things that they shouldn't, and we got to be vigilant about that. I think examining, really paying close attention to the way words are used is extremely important for trying to get a grasp on how racism, white supremacy works, because so much of white supremacy is coded in the terms that people use to talk about white people, terms people use to talk about non-white people. Could you elaborate on that a bit?
Well, the way that the core of my scholarship on language and racism wasn't really about this kind of explicit language. As you say, I point out that I was more interested in phenomena where you had to understand presuppositions, where you really had to fill in the blanks for yourself, And I originally started working not on anything that had to do with African Americans, which is, of course, what most people think of when they think of the most important victims of white supremacy in the United States. But instead it had to do with the way that white people, and also, I should say, African Americans, to the best of my knowledge, many of them at least, use Spanish. And I studied a phenomenon that I called mock Spanish, which is just, using the occasional Spanish word in your English. And probably the most famous example of this is the word mañana, where somebody says, have you worked up that project for me yet? And you say, no, I haven't done it. I'm getting to it mañana, And my argument was that when you say that you're saying in not getting this done yet, I'm behaving a little bit like a Spanish-speaking person. I've been a little bit procrastinating and a little bit lazy, Otherwise, to say that doesn't make any sense at all. Why don't you say, I'll get to it tomorrow? And I argued that what was being invoked there was a very, very widely shared image of historically Spanish-speaking populations as people who are lazy. So that was sort of where I started on this whole thing, of the real unspoken presuppositions. And it was very interesting to me to discover that people who came from Latin America, for instance, who would hear Americans saying mañana in that way, they found it very confusing. Why are they saying that? Because they didn't share this image, this presupposed image that you had to fill in of the lazy Spanish-speaking person or the lazy Mexican or something like that. And it took me, it takes me about, takes me weeks to teach
I totally agree.
That.
I'm sorry?
I said it takes me weeks to get students to understand that analysis. So there's a lot about it in the book.
Wow. I totally agree. I just want to make sure that listeners grasp the explicit things that you'll catch. We'll talk about some of those and make comments about like the Tiger Woods and fried chicken and that sort of thing. Definitely, that's important too. But also the things that you wouldn't think about. The example that you just used about using mock Spanish, that was something I definitely want to get to. And even other examples. I harp on this all the time. The word
fair
has
pops up in your book regularly.
The word which? I'm sorry.
The word fair.
Can you spell it? It's hard to hear.
It's on your book, or in your book rather. You have but fair housing projects by a variety.
It's the idea of fair. Oh, okay.
Right, and I think that just that term, when you have a term that can represent justice, validity, reasonableness, beauty, and white, is, in my opinion, an extraordinary tool of white supremacy. And in my opinion, it's surprising that more people have not said, hey, wait a minute, maybe we shouldn't use fair as a term that's synonymous with justice and white. You're not treating me fairly. You're not treating me like a white person. Just that one term right there, I think, is a phenomenal example of what you talk about, where the white supremacy is coded in such a way that people don't even pay attention to it. They're totally blind to the racist implications of a term like that. Does that make sense?
Well, one of the points that I try to make is that part of the project of white supremacy is to really co-opt a lot of the language so that things come to mean what white people want them to mean. And I haven't specifically studied fair, but I'm perfectly willing to believe that it's one of those words that have been co-opted.
I mean, who's the fairest of them all? I think all of these so-called fairy tales that I've seen, it's generally a white woman who's saying that. Well, I mean, I think it's pretty obvious. I think a lot of the white people.
I hadn't really thought of that. That's interesting. I suspect, and here I'm being a linguist, I kind of suspect that fair meaning fair-skinned and stuff like that, and the fair in fairy, and the fair in the fair that's like just or even-handed. I strongly suspect that those have three different etymological sources, but I don't know that. I can't tell you what they are right now, but I can see why people would associate them.
I strongly suspect the system of white supremacy has co-opted all of that, and I would just encourage anyone, take a look at the way those terms are used. You will see, particularly if you have an understanding of racism, white supremacy, it'll be glaring. I was going to say many of the folks that you quote in your book, Timothy Wise, or he's not quoted, but Timothy Wise, Dr. Joe Fagan, Dr. Karen Brodkin, many of those folks have been on the program. In fact, every white person that I have questioned about that term, they have totally agreed, and they, even if they haven't thought about it, they have immediately seen the racist implications of that term. I wanted to ask...
Well, there's an interesting discussion of the word fair, actually, by another scholar, an Australian scholar, named Anna Rizbitska, and she argues that fair is a fundamental expression of what she thinks of as sort of standard world English, and that it encompasses a huge number of presuppositions about the nature of justice and stuff like that. And if you are of the view that our system of justice was poisoned from the beginning by racism, why then, her analysis would have to be adjusted slightly. But she does see it as a very, very key term. She has a very interesting study of that word.
What's her name again? Anna?
Wierzbicka, Wierzbicka.
Okay. See if we can track that.
It's a Polish name, but she's lived in Australia for a long time.
Okay. I will check my co-host, Justice. She's also with us to see if she has some questions. Justice, if you have some questions for Dr. Jane Hill, your line should be open. Please proceed. Man.
Is anybody out there?
I'm still with us. I think she's here too. My switchboard didn't open her line up. Give me 5 seconds, and we'll tap that again and see if we can get her line to open up. All right, trying one more time. Justice, if you have some questions for Dr. Hill, your line should be open.
Hello?
Yes,
Can I be
ma'am.
heard?
Hello.
Okay. Hi, Dr. Jan Hill.
Hi.
What is the Uto Aztecan? Yeah, what is that?
Oh, okay. That's a language family in Native America. It's one of the biggest ones. Language families are languages that are related to each other because they're descended from a single common ancestor, and this one has a common ancestor about 4,000 years ago. And it includes languages like Nahuatl, or sometimes known as Aztec in Mexico, and languages like Shoshone and Paiute and Hopi and Luiseño in the United States, and a lot of other languages in Mexico. So it's a great big family of languages.
Mm. Can you talk about of how the reproduction of white racism, of what I call racism, white supremacy, functions as a moral imperative?
Well, let's see. What you guys ask hard questions. One of the things that I noticed when I was doing my research is that I was working a lot with internet discussion sites and comment sections in newspapers and that sort of thing. And it's, of course, those are notorious, especially the ones that are not edited. We know that all kinds of crazy people get on those. But also people that you would think of as perfectly normal, sort of representative of the population. And one of the things that absolutely fascinates me is that the idea that the commitment that people have to denying that they could possibly be racist, and in fact, if you say white supremacist, people will get crazy. White people say there isn't. I know that people of color use white supremacy all the time. They totally think that's what's going on. I've never met an African American scholar who didn't use white supremacy and racism and white racism as simultaneous comments. But if you use that with white people, it just makes them nuts, And I argued that part of this is the assertion of what I call white virtue, the idea that we're better than we used to be, and that it's a terrible insult to say that that we might still be white supremacists because we're virtuous, And so in a way, precisely by asserting the absence of those practices, you actually manage to twist yourself around into one of the very important kind of cultural pillars of white supremacy, which is the idea that white people are virtuous in some kind of inherent way, or that people who are defined as white are virtuous, morally good, So I guess that would be my answer. And it's quite noticeable. It's really noticeable. You can see it with politicians whenever anybody says somebody is racist. Rush Limbaugh, who is a stone racist, gets really angry when people say that he is what he is.
Can you please explain to me of what white virtue is, and what are some ways white people celebrate white virtue?
Well, one of the things that white people do is that they think that things that they have because of the system of white supremacy, like sort of clean neighborhoods and what seemed until a few weeks ago to be relatively just policing and that sort of thing, that it's because they're good, and they think that if they have economic resources, it's because they're good. They think that if their house is clean, they think it's because they're good. They think that if they're healthy, it's because they've been careful about their diet and their exercise and so forth. And I think all of this is, sort of a very white people thing to do. That all the advantages that you have because of structural properties of the society that you live in, or because of accident or luck or something like that, become instead evidence of virtue. And then this is often contrasted, with the poor habits, the laziness, the economic improvidence, and so forth of people of color.
You mentioned, well, you were naming different ways of how white people celebrate white virtue, but you didn't say like what it is. Can you like tell me
what it
what is white
is
virtue?
Okay, well, one of the things that I argue is that I said that white racism is a cultural project, and one of the things that it tries to do is to recruit resources of every type, symbolic resources, economic resources, moral resources, to what I call the zone of whiteness, which is constantly being redefined. And so white virtue is all the good qualities that are supposed to belong to people who are in that zone, and then they get defined as inherent. And so these good qualities are things like economic providence, living a healthy life, being sexually careful and clean, not drinking too much, yada, 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 all of that kind of stuff. Taking care of your yard, dusting the top of the bookcase.
Do you think?
Your car, or whatever it is,
Okay, so like helping non-white people out.
I think that being charitable is considered to be a white virtue.
I see.
By white people, by many white people. I mean, that would be among the virtues that they would claim that they have.
I see. What are some ways white people encourage non-white people to celebrate white virtue?
Well, I think white people don't really care if people of color celebrate white virtue. They really, and this goes way beyond the scholarship in my book. There's a very interesting paradox. On the one hand, white people care very much about what people of color think about them because they don't want people of color to think that they're racist, and they get very angry and very upset. And if a person of color says that a white person is racist, they'll say, "Oh, well, that person is playing the race card." So on the one hand, they really care a lot about that. But on the other hand, it's interesting. I think that they feel that they could get along fine if they never had to interact with people of color at all. And this is, I say, this goes way beyond the scope of my scholarship. So I'm making claims here that I don't have any empirical data to back up. I mean, what I really talk about is how people talk. Okay.
Is race cards a joke, or just curious?
Playing the race card? Oh no,
Mm-hmm.
I think when people say that, they're very serious. I don't remember. I mean, in my generation, or me in particular, I remember the first time I ever heard about playing the race card was the O.J. Simpson trial. I don't know how old you are. You may not go back that far. But people said that O.J.'s defense was playing the race card, in arguing that the reason that O.J. was on trial was because there were racists on the Los Angeles Police Department police force, okay? And so that was playing the race card. And then I've heard, playing the race card from the bottom of the deck and stuff. And it's a funny metaphor, but it's not a joke. When a white person says that, it means I reject what you feel, And I think you're wrong. You have not encountered racism, and I deny that it's present. So that's what they mean, and it's not a joke at all.
Have you seen how some museum projects help reproduce and maintain white supremacy? If so, can you share your understanding?
Well, again, this goes beyond the scope of my scholarship. But again, I can certainly tell you, I mean, being as I am 72 years old, I can tell you that probably until the last 20 or 30 years, if you went to a museum, and you can still see this in some museums, you would see in the great, beautiful galleries, you know, that's where you saw European art and sculpture. And all of it was labeled with the names of the artists and that sort of thing. Whereas if you wanted to look at the arts associated with the, you know, historic cultures of people of color, of just, you know, assuming that there weren't any in Europe, which is what many of these museums assumed, you would be shunted off to some dark corner of the museum where none of the material had the artist's name on it. It was, you know, sort of cultural stuff and not artistic stuff, and often interpreted as utilitarian rather than meant to be aesthetic, even though it might look pretty. You know, you can still find that sort of thing. I think museums are very, very gradually changing, but it's very slow. And of course, if you go to small museums, I have a former student who studies little county museums in the western United States, which had, you know, 15,000 years of Native American history before, and, you know, hundreds of years of Mexican history before they had history of European Americans. And most of these museums are almost entirely dedicated to the white pioneers, and they'll have a little case off in a corner somewhere with some Indian pottery or something like that, and that's it. So that sort of thing you can still find all over the place. And this is a claim that all of the history that means anything is the history of white people.
I do not have any more questions at this time, but yeah. Thank you very much, and go ahead, Gus.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Context of white supremacy. I definitely wanted to get further information about mock Spanish because that was a new concept for me, and it was a new way of thinking about how white supremacy works. You point this out in the book. Can you kind of explain what that term means for our listeners, mock Spanish, and how that reproduces white supremacy?
Okay, well, I grew up in Los Angeles, and when I was growing up, even though I didn't speak Spanish, I do now, but I didn't, you know, when I was a child and a teenager, I acquired all sorts of funny Spanish words. So, you know, I mentioned before mañana, and I knew cerveza for beer, and I knew adios, you know, all kinds of stuff like that, amigo. And when I actually started seriously thinking about this, I realized that mock Spanish actually can be defined as a sort of systematic phenomenon that appears all over the English-speaking world. I've seen it in Australia. I've seen it in the United Kingdom, although it's certainly most intense in the United States. And it's got about 4 parts of things that you can do. The first thing that you can do is that you can take a perfectly ordinary Spanish word and make it mean something kind of negative. So that, for instance, or it's kind of negative or kind of jokey or something like that. So one of the things that is interesting is the word nada, N-A-D-A, nada, as pronounced by white people, which in Spanish simply means nothing. I mean, it means nothing exactly the way nothing means nothing in English. But in mock Spanish, nada means absolutely nothing, you know. It's like nothing in a bad way, okay? So that's an example of that sort of first strategy. And the second strategy is to use a kind of naughty Spanish word when you wouldn't really be able to appropriately use an English word. So one of my examples is that I bought a coffee cup in a gift shop that says on it "caca de toro." Okay, and this is actually not an expression in Spanish, although it literally translates into feces of the bull. But you couldn't have a coffee. I mean, a lot of people wouldn't want a coffee cup in English that said bullshit. I mean, I would be perfectly happy to have such a coffee cup, but a lot of people would find that, maybe a little racy. And if you had it on your desk in your workplace, your supervisor might ask you to put it away, that kind of stuff, But it's fine to have that in Spanish. And then the third thing that you can do is that you can add little pieces of Spanish like El and O, so you can say things like El Cheapo and El Griso and El Foldo and stuff like that, to sort of put a negative spin, an even more negative spin. So if you say something is cheap, well, that just means, you might be able to afford it, and that might be good. But if you say something is El Cheapo, it means that it's, undesirable, poorly made, and cheap because it's of poor quality. And then the last part of mock Spanish is to make jokey, Hispanicized versions, like saying things like hasta la pasta and hasty lumbago and hasty banana and things like that, which people used to do a lot when I was a kid. Instead of just saying goodbye. It creates a sort of jokey tone. And when you put all of this together, and you'd have to read the long chapter in the book to see there's about 100 words you can use, a lot of different things you can do. What it ends up doing is reproducing a set of very, very negative images of people who speak Spanish. And again, all of this exists. It's never explicit. And I used the mañana example earlier. Mañana in Spanish just means tomorrow, in a completely neutral way. But in English, it means tomorrow in a kind of lazy, laid-back way.
Gus, can you hold on just a second? I have one more question. You were saying like something was a little bit racy. What does that mean? Exactly.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm old. Maybe a little bit sketchy is maybe what your generation would say. I don't know,
Are you trying to, refer it to racism or because, racy?
No.
What is that?
And I don't know what the origin of the word racy that means, maybe on the edge of naughty or something like that. I don't think it has anything to do with race in the sense of raza, although Gus might think it does. But it means, sketchy or edgy or maybe slightly inappropriate.
I see. Okay. Gus, you can go ahead.
Maybe you got another example of that fair type there. Yeah. And I'm going to look up fair and email it to Gus because I'm sure that's folk etymology. But if you think that's what it means, that's what it means. We linguists get technical about this shit.
I see. I guess back with the mock language, it stood out because I had seen. Well, you list a lot of examples in the book, but I was.
Yeah, there's mock African American English too.
Right. I
am not a speaker of that, so I have to look it up. I can't just produce it.
Right. I had seen a lot of the examples that you cite, even in the film Terminator. You break down the passage where.
Oh yeah, that's one of my favorite movies.
Yeah, there are many people. It made millions. Where the little segment where Arnold Schwarzenegger's character he is speaking in his roboticized voice, and a little boy, John Connor, he's telling him, no, you got to relax, and you can say no problemo and hasta la vista and dickwad and all this other stuff. And you point out how you throw in these Spanish terms in a real vulgar scene where all of the terms that they're using is either something lewd or it's to be disparaging to somebody, to blow somebody off, to be kind of curt in conversation.
Oh, yeah.
And how that's a pattern that you see. I think the other one, it's an image. It was an advertisement, I think, for some sort of insecticide where it said adios, and it was supposed to get rid of.
Adios cucaracha, right?
Yeah, and just kind of the impact that has, whether it's conscious, unconscious, really doesn't matter. The impact, it influences the way that you think about non-white Spanish-speaking people to say, oh, these people, they're not really serious. We don't really have to take them that seriously. They're just lewd, lazy, drunken folks. It really reinforces a certain way of thinking that encourages, condones being racist against these people. Does that make sense?
And it's really interesting. It's a very important part of certain kinds of humor. And if you don't laugh, it makes you a jerk. So it's very hard not to be complicit.
Mm-hmm. That thing with the jokes, I think is incredibly important. I've said that repeatedly. Racist jokes are a huge aspect of transporting racism, white supremacy from generation to generation, person to person. And it really shined through. I was watching the film Kinsey this past weekend, but just reading your work, when you take something like the mock Spanish or a racist joke about any number of non-white people, and you make something funny out of racism, it takes an act that should be reprehensible, something that we should be repulsed by this. Oh my gosh, racism, that is evil. We're talking about mistreating people, but when you pair it with something, when you pair it with something funny, that begins that changing the association to where now we're rethinking this. Now maybe this isn't bad because now I have an association with this. It's funny. Racism is a humorous
it's just
thing.
a nice light moment. Yeah. Oh
exactly.
Yeah, it's nasty.
And at least for me, just the widespread use of these racist jokes. There's so many of them. Joe Fegan, we talked about this on the program, and so many, especially targeting black people, non-white people as a whole, but tons of them, especially focused on black people. To me, it suggests that it's fun practicing racism, that this is enjoyable for people to talk about this sort of thing. In fact,
that was one of my sort of blinding insights, about 20 years ago, was that racism was fun. And a person who's written about this really eloquently, I'm not sure if he's still alive, a guy named Rafe Ezekiel, who, boy, he really went, he did some tough field work. He worked with Ku Kluxers and people like that. And they were just funny as hell. This is a bunch of good old boys. They were making jokes all the time. Constant laughter.
Wow.
It's kind of scary. They had a ball.
Dr. Welsing moment. I would point out for listeners, I don't think, in fact, I know it's not just KKK members who are doing these jokes. You've got a lot of white people who would never be associated.
Oh, no, they're very, very widespread.
Exactly.
And it's interesting. Unfortunately, my fieldwork really, my personal experience, at least in recent years, doesn't include a lot of that because I'm kind of a gray-haired older lady, and people assume, with glasses and my hair in a bun in the back, and people assume that they can't kind of, get lewd around. And a lot of the jokes, of course, are dirty jokes. But I've heard from my students about the way that this happens all the time. And Joe Fagan and his students have a huge collection of very, very good field data on just perfectly ordinary, everyday people doing this sort of thing. As you say, not Ku Kluxers at all. But Ezekiel's work was, the amount of humor that the Ku Kluxers used for solidarity was very striking.
His first name? Ezekiel, what's his first name?
Raphael. Rafe.
Is it Raphael or Rafe?
I knew him.
Oh, okay.
He lived in Ann Arbor. I knew his ex-wife. Anyway, he was known as Rafe, but I think his book is under Raphael.
Okay, Raphael Ezekiel. Okay, yeah. I will look for that. Just in the same vein with those racist jokes, we talked about the incident many people have talked about the incident with Michael Richards, former star on Friends, and his outburst on stage with the black patron. You pointed out something that I thought was really important in the book, and this was another one I hadn't really thought about this before, that there was a moment If you watch the video where all this is going down on stage, where his first outburst of nigger, 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 and the crowd is not immediately like, oh my God, I can't believe you said that. When you say there's a moment where they're kind of waiting like, wait a minute, maybe there's a punchline, maybe there's a joke here, where you point out great insight where even the most offensive of racist comments, racial slurs, even the most offensive slur is not reflexively offensive to white people. I just wanted you to kind of elaborate on that.
Yeah, I think that's true. And, you know, when I would discuss, oh my Lord, when I would talk about this issue in class, you can imagine the question I would always get, which is, if they can say it, why can't we say it? And it's not reflexively offensive to white people. I can tell you it's reflexively offensive to black people. If I had, you know, African American students in a class, I would have to stop and say, look, you know, I just want to warn everybody, you know, and if you want to leave the room or if you object, you know, we can talk about it, but I'm going to have to say a word, you know, that may be really, really offensive to you, because they get super offended, but the white kids do not.
I think that is a product of probably what's happening in a lot of their homes with those racist jokes. I'm sure they have heard that term used, and it just, you know, is not that big a deal for them, particularly.
Yeah, they ran into it somewhere along the line. And it's interesting, always that question, if they can say it, why can't we say it, you know? And it's, again, something that I see as a question of this project of recruiting and controlling and co-opting all the linguistic resources. You know, these things are going to mean what we white people want them to mean and not what you guys want them to mean.
Absolutely. Context of white supremacy. Again, our guest, Dr. Jane H. Hill, discussing her book, The Everyday Language of White Racism. You also spend a significant amount of time talking about another incident that happened not that long ago. Strom Thurmond, his 100th birthday party, broadcast on C-SPAN, and Mr. Trent Lott comes out to make his remarks, which he actually had said something very similar before, celebrating Strom Thurmond and saying that he had endorsed him when he ran for president some years ago, and if we had elected this man, then we wouldn't have had all the problems that we've got now. Many people alluding to black people's civil rights movement.
And everybody should know, by the way, that when he said that, Trent Lott was Majority Leader of the Senate. He was the senior senator from Mississippi, and he was coming in as Majority Leader.
Wow. Significant position of power in politics, correct?
Yeah, pretty high.
And also, Strom, I mean, it's so much. You talk a lot about how the response, the outcry around his comments, and people defending him and saying, oh, he wasn't racist, this was just lighthearted talk, he wasn't serious, and other people taking the other position that, you know, yes, I think this was incorrect, inappropriate, and you also made special attention to point out that most people did not indict him as racist. That was very, very low on the scale. People saying that this guy's a racist. Most people did not take that position, whether they thought what he said was incorrect, inappropriate, or not. They did not take the position that he was racist.
It actually took a couple of days for anybody to say anything about it at all. In fact, the first person that I know about who said anything about it was Gwen Ifill, an African-American newscaster on PBS. Yes. And she played the tape, and she said, tell me what you think of that. Yeah. But in my chapter, I mean, I use that incident as sort of prototypical of the kind of thing that happens all the time. I mean, it happened in the Tiger Woods incident when, I am having a senior moment about the name of the golfer who talked about
Fuzzy Zoeller?
Fried chicken. Fuzzy Zoeller. I mean, it happened at that one, and it happens again and again and again. But in the chapter, I point out that the New York Times devoted an entire section to the Trent Lott incident for 2 solid weeks under the heading Divisive Words, and they never once called Lott a racist. Never once.
That, in my opinion,
I think it's a word that the New York Times just doesn't let you use, which is a great. I would just love. I mean, they don't use liar, for instance. I would really love to have access to their secret style sheet, but they don't use the word racist, which is one of the most. I mean, that's a beautiful example of this erasing the idea that it's out there. You just are never going to hear about it in the New York Times.
I think that is part of the racist code. You're saying that might be one of the rules at the New York Times. You talk about the term liar, that you can't, and they explain why. You can't call someone a liar in the New York Times.
Yeah.
You have to have information about their intent and what they were thinking, and perhaps they've taken the same position on racist, that we're just not going to label anybody a racist.
No, it's just, you will not find that word used as repertorial language. They will quote somebody saying that, but they will not use it in their own language.
But I think that
it's really kind of incredible.
I find in my opinion, and your work helped me come to this conclusion, and I think we talked about it before, that's just a part of the white supremacist code. You do not call other white people racist. And in fact, it's my line from the Penn State situation. We can't tell because we will all get in trouble. And I think you do flush that out in the book around the situation with Strom Thurmond, where, as you said, this guy is a senator, Trent Lott, powerful politician. He's been in office for years. If we're saying this guy's a racist, what does that say about all of us who voted for him repeatedly, apparently, so that he can maintain this position? And I think even for me, just looking at this whole incident, it really magnifies we are swimming. The air we breathe is saturated with white supremacy. We're at Strom Thurmond's birthday party. This guy, if anybody should be labeled a racist white supremacist, it should be Strom Thurmond. This guy's entire career, regardless of whatever changed, and him refining his language and what he said post or after the 70s, this guy, senator in South Carolina, said he held the longest filibuster of any senator, any lone senator, in his opposition to the Civil Rights Bill, 1957, where he did a nonstop 24-hour filibuster against civil rights legislation. Strom Thurmond, Dixie, if there's a poster child for a racist white supremacist, Strom Thurmond would have to be a candidate, and I got to make sure that I get in. Strom Thurmond, and I think it would be totally accurate to say raped the nanny in his household. He was 22, she was 16, black female servant in his home, produced a child with her, and this didn't even become public knowledge until after he died. We're not saying Strom Thurmond, the deadbeat dad who didn't take care of his child, Strom Thurmond, the racist who's had a whole career as a senator, a public official, as a staunch and most of the time explicit racist. We're not saying any of that. We're here to celebrate his birthday, his 100th birthday, while he's still a senator on C-SPAN. That's what in my opinion.
President of the United States was there. Oh, yeah.
That swimming, the air we breathe is white supremacy. In fact, just reading this, it almost became laughable that we're talking about whether what Trent Lott said was racist or not racist. We're here to celebrate a renowned, proud racist and his long career of upholding racism, white supremacy from his Senate seat. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. And it's interesting. I think Trent Lott's mistake was that he kind of let it out. He let the secret loose. I've often thought, that if you have a Confederate flag on your bumper sticker or something like that, I've often wondered how come that isn't like a swastika. Why is that legal? And I read a very, very interesting book a number of years ago, a work of history by a historian named David Blight, who talked about how after the Civil War and after Reconstruction, the great concern of everybody was to bring the people who had been in the Confederacy back into the Union, to heal the wounds, et cetera. But, of course, if you think about this, of course, what it was the wounds among white people. And one of the ways that this happened and continues to happen is this legend that, oh, all these old white supremacists, they've changed, they're cured and stuff like that. But, you know, and I know it ain't so, and we can see 1,000 ways in this country that they're still powerfully imposing a regime of white supremacy. But, you know, they're a little more discreet about it than they were in Strom's, you know, glory years.
Yeah. I particularly wanted you to flesh out the way that when someone makes a racist comment, I think even we can take some of the more recent commentary. Earlier this year, President Obama, when the whole budget crisis was going down, and I think they referenced it as the tar baby that we don't want to be close to. Was that the term that was used? Yeah. When these sort of remarks get made, and they didn't say that he was a racist either. They will either say it was a gaffe, it was a mistake, it was a joke in poor taste. Can you talk about
yesterday? Rush Limbaugh said that the First Lady was uppity.
Wow.
Yep.
Wow. And these just get dismissed as the person misspoke. The person was joking. Poor choice of words. All these different ways of excusing racist behavior. In fact, I would say anytime that you see a white person make some sort of racist comment publicly, in the front stage, as Dr. Joe Fagan would say, when they do this publicly, not privately once you're at home and it's okay, but when a white person has that sort of thing happen where they have slipped and said something racist publicly, or if they say it privately and it gets out, you can really watch another facet of racism at work, that other white people will come to that person's defense, even if they say.
Oh yeah, absolutely. It's amazing. It's like a routine. These things are so stereotyped, you know, and they happen again and again and again and again. And of course, the ones that I study are the ones that could, you know, that were in the newspaper and, you know, that involved famous people, or, you know, were all over the internet or something like that. But people do that all the time. I mean, somebody will say something racist just in conversation, and if anybody calls them on it, they'll say, "Oh, I was just kidding," you know, or "You're too thin-skinned." They'll say something like that, you know. And it's a very, very established routine.
Part of the code, ladies and gentlemen, the racist white supremacist code, I mean. I'll give out the number in case anybody wants to dial in if they have questions for Dr. Hill. The number is 760-569-7676, and the code is 564-943#. I'll give out that one more time, 760-569-7676, and the code is 564-943#. You also talk about, and you've mentioned it already on the program, how because of just the awesome power of the system, and particularly the way that racist men and racist women use language, use words, that many non-white people pick up these terms and start behaving, thinking, speaking in the same way that racist people do. You pointed that out with the mock Spanish.
I think mock Spanish has gotten to be part of kind of being an American, you know.
That black people do that. And you pointed out the film Con Air that came out in the 90s with Dave Chappelle and Nicolas Cage, John Cusack, some other, John Malkovich. But you point out Dave Chappelle's character, who's named Pinball, another Dr. Welsing moment. Dave Chappelle's character, Pinball, in this film, he sees a non-white person who is Native American, and he says, how? And then he proceeds to set him on fire. And I think that
what they're actually doing is creating a diversion so that they can get out of the plane, I understand. I haven't actually seen the movie. Somebody had to tell me that, but but yeah, you know, I mean, there is that language, you know, and the idea that you can use it and it's funny, you know, that sort of thing.
A racist. I've actually seen that. I haven't seen Con Air in a long time, but I have seen that repeatedly in films where white people will put the racist joke in the mouth of a non-white person, as in what happened in that film, getting Dave Chappelle to go and do the how thing to a Native American. I saw a recent film where it was a racist joke that I had just seen it for the first time, and then I saw this film, and they got the black person telling the racist joke to everybody, and it gets a big laugh, and they have fun and go on.
That is not surprising. And white people love to talk about how racist black people are. It's just amazing. So.
Yeah, I just wanted to make sure I pointed out for our listeners the interesting thing, and it's been some years since I've seen Con Air. You have Dave Chappelle, who's a black male. His name is Pinball in the film. Ving Rhames from Pulp Fiction and Rosewood. Ving Rhames is in the film, and his name is Diamond Dog. So the two black characters' names, Diamond Dog and Pinball. And they're both inmates, have been in jail. I think Dave Chappelle's character, I think he's a drug addict of some sort. Typical, all the ugly stereotypes. And Dave Chappelle, he is killed. He is late getting on the plane, and he gets stuck in the landing gear. And so he ends up slowing the plane down because the landing gear is not all the way elevated, so they have extra drag. And so they end up throwing his body out of the plane with a message so that they can continue on their mission. Just the racism, white supremacy, just astounding at all times, always there.
Are you serious, Gus?
Yes, ma'am. That's Con Air.
Wow, that is crazy. Wow.
Yeah, you'll have to go rent that one. No, I think I'm glad I haven't seen it.
And I even forgot, they have a different non-black, non-white character. His sole mission from beginning of the film to end of the film is to rape another female. It's every ugly stereotype you can think of. And the main character, Nicolas Cage, he's a white man. He's the only convict that's being transported who's not supposed to be there. It's just like Shawshank Redemption. They make sure that you know he's in jail, but he's only here because he was protecting his wife in a fight and he was unjustly incarcerated. He's not supposed to be here. He's supposed to be dropped off. All the rest of these animal, savage, non-white people, they're supposed to be here. They're convicts and, yeah, rapists, drug dealers, the whole nine. Con Air.
That's sort of, I have always, in order to write the book, I had to look at some statistics on incarceration, which is, of course, an international scandal, not for white people in the United States. They think that everybody who's in jail deserves it, and are not shocked at the extraordinary disproportion. And images like that make it okay for them. It doesn't occur to people that's so shocking and so extraordinary.
Wow. Context of white supremacy. I wanted to make sure I connected the dots. At the beginning of the program, I started out with a song from Two Live Crew. For folks who don't know, hip-hop group or rap group from the late 80s, early 90s. They had, I guess, quite a few hits or what have you, but very controversial. A lot of black people did not like the music that they made. And you made reference on page 90 of your book where you were talking about different speech styles.
It's sort of styles of interaction, yes.
I wanted to read exactly what you said so listeners, they'll get the same context that I read this. This is on page, one.
I don't have the book in front of me, unfortunately.
I'm just getting my
But I
page.
do remember that I talked about the debate about misogyny, and this Two Live Crew member actually explains, he is a beautiful account of indirection in African American communication styles.
Here it is. It's on page 91 of The Everyday Language of White Racism. And you write, African Americans in some contexts permit departures from personalism. Mitchell Kernan points out that African American ideologies of interaction place as much responsibility for the production of meaning on the hearer as on the speaker. For instance, Mitchell Kernan reports an incident when one woman became angry at a perceived insult from another. The speaker said of the angry women's reaction, I wasn't signifying on her but I always say that if the shoe fits, wear it. In teaching, I have often illustrated this point with a television interview I heard in 1989 or 1990 during an early episode of Panic over misogynistic language in rap music precipitated by Two Live Crew's album As Nasty as They Wanna Be. The rapper being interviewed defended this kind of language, asserting, "When I say bitch, you don't have to turn around." This again, page 91, the everyday language of white racism. The first time I read that passage, I kind of stopped and I was like, something seems incorrect about this. And I let it, just kind of sit in the back of my mind, and I kept reading. And then I pay attention to metaphors. This is an example of the difference in communication styles between black people and other groups. And I thought, wow, Two Live Crew being used as an example for how black people have different ways of communicating or different ways of using language. Two Live Crew, arguably one of the most offensive rap groups of all time. As I said, you had throngs of black people who were furious about this, the lyrics and this being promoted. Throngs of black people. In my opinion, a white person, you writing this and using this as your example of how black people have different styles of communication, I believe that is an act of racism, white supremacy. It's the album As Nasty as They Wanna Be, where they're calling other females bitches, even calling themselves dogs. In my opinion, it reinforces many of the same stereotypes, some of them that I just mentioned, where you got black males in this film, Con Air, named Diamond Dog, and then you got this group here calling other females bitches and calling themselves dogs and freaks. It's just, in my opinion, it's the worst representation of black people, and I feel like it's an act of racism, maybe even a deliberate act of racism on your part. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, you might be right that it wasn't a good example to use. I used to use it because students who would not remember the Mitchell Kernan example would always remember the "when I say bitch, you don't have to turn around." It would stick in their minds, and so they would understand about this technique of indirection where, the hearer is responsible. And white people can use that too. We can certainly say if the shoe fits, wear it. But you may be right. I think that I should say in my own defense that the audiences, notice I'm getting defensive right away, that the audiences that I were talking to, this was years after the Two Live Crew controversy. I don't think anybody knew what the rap group was that I was talking about. In fact, I think I had to find out that it was Two Live Crew that was the topic of the interview. But it does make a very memorable example, and it's unfortunate it's an example that, yes, may reinforce some stereotypes.
Wow, just hearing your explanation, and I have Dr. Joe Fagan, many other white people, some of them that you mentioned on the program, I have long ago concluded white equals racism, white supremacy. I just said black people, non-white people, you should never be surprised at a white person practicing racism, white supremacy. That's what this is all about. We should be on guard and expecting that. And I brought it up, just your explanation and you saying that you use that example because it would be memorable. It would be something that would stick in a person's mind reading your work. That, for me, just further compounds my suspicions about this because, wow, what an indelible memory to leave on the brain of anyone, a black person, a non-white person, anyone, that black people are different. And one of the examples of how their differences in communication are articulated, Two Live Crew, As Nasty as They Want to Be. I mean, wow, it's
this was not the album. Remember, this was the rapper defending his language. And Claudia Mitchell Kernan is an African American scholar. She's was dean of the graduate school at UCLA. This has also been written about by Marcelina Morgan and other African American scholars. It's not something I made up, but the example is unfortunate. You're right about that.
Racist. I would substitute unfortunate for racist, white supremacist. I'm sure if you've read.
Well, there it is. Bubbling up from the bottom of my upbringing. I've never claimed it wasn't there.
Okay. I would just point out for listeners, I strongly suspect there are other examples that could have been chosen to illustrate the point that you were trying to make about the differences in communication. Just, yeah, glad I made sure to bring that up. You also, I guess I should check to make sure we don't have any phone folks that have questions yet. Okay, if you have questions and you're on the talk shoe line, it's *8. If you're on the 760 line, that number again, 760-569-7676, and the code is 564-943#. If you're on that line and you have questions, it's *6. You talk about Mark Twain, Huckleberry Finn. We talked about Twain and his work several times on the program.
And Joe Pagan just hates Huckleberry Finn.
He hates why? I could have asked him when he was on the program. If you could paraphrase really quickly, why does Dr. Joe Pagan hate Huckleberry Finn?
Well, he thinks it's a racist book, and he particularly objects to the, to the constant use of racist language. And my own opinion is that, I am not a literary scholar, but I know that there is an analysis that argues that that Mark Twain is trying to, that Jim, who is referred to constantly in the book as Nigger Jim, is a redemptive, Christ-like figure, and that the contrast between his character, which is extraordinarily generous and kind and noble, and the fact that he's called by this name all the time, it was really, I think, in my view, intended by Mark Twain to jar people and to make them think. But Joe strongly disagrees. He thinks that the use of nigger to characterize Jim is reinforcing deep racist stereotypes, and that the nobility and stuff is just, window dressing.
Wow. I guess. Well, let me make sure I'm clear. What's your opinion? You already said you're not a literary scholar, but what's your view on Huckleberry Finn?
My opinion is that Twain, by making that contradiction between the noble character referred to by other characters with the lowest language and treated very, very cavalierly by the other characters. They treat him as if he doesn't have, anything to say for himself at all, utterly selfish treatment of him by Huck Finn. That Mark Twain is trying to make people think about racism and trying to make people, think about the possibility that white supremacy has no basis, because the nobility of this character is found in a character of color. But I'm perfectly ready to admit that there are all kinds of other analyses of that book, but that's my opinion. I think that it's quite a profound challenge of racism.
Wow, I don't see the challenge at all in the book, and I say that I'm aware that now I think there at least is one revision of Huckleberry Finn that they've taken nigger out.
They took all the N-words. Yeah.
Over 200 of them they had to remove. Even if you take that out, in my opinion, it still would not be a book that challenges white supremacy. In my opinion, it would be a book that I would say is a great example of reinforcing racism, white supremacy. And I would just look at the way that I'll just use the name that Mark Twain chose. Nigger Jim is treated in the book. It's like one long-running racist joke where he's constantly
he's
mistreated.
Treated very, very badly. And you could argue, that his nobility is a sort of white fantasy of submission, And in fact, this is a character, I don't remember who it was. Initially, the analysis was published in the Black Scholar, the idea of the magic Negro, the redeeming figure who somehow, rather than hating white people, saves them from themselves or something like that. You could analyze Jim as an early so-called magic Negro.
Wow. I think that for me, that makes a lot more sense, and I see a lot more evidence to support that than many people who assert that this book is somehow challenging racism. I don't see that at all. Even when you get to the end, like I said, it's like one long racist joke. When you get to the end, where Tom and Huck, they have enjoyed this game of, oh, we're going to get you free, Jim. We're going to get you nigger, Jim. Excuse me. We're going to get you free, nigger,
Yeah.
Jim. Only to get to the end and say, oh, well, you've already been freed, and we were just having a little fun. It's just like
Yeah.
just picking on him and teasing this guy for what? Just for our amusement. And it's tons of that all through the book where they put something metal in his food and he bites down on it and almost mashes out all his teeth. I mean, it's just it's one long racist joke in my opinion. And then when you factor in the 215, I think, uses of the term nigger in the book, I'm really at a loss for all of the white people that I've heard who assert that this book is somehow working against racism. And I've never heard anyone, I've never talked to anyone or seen anyone write where reading this book helped them come to a better understanding about racism, and if they were white, to work against racism. I've never heard that. Are you aware of anyone who's had that metamorphosis as a result of reading?
No.
Hmm.
No, but when I read the book, I didn't react to the jokes as jokes. I mean, to me, the book is, very hard to read. It's tragic, and these kids are so horrible, in their unthinking cruelty. To me, it's a very hard and difficult book to read. So, I mean, it may very well be that many people have read it and been very entertained by it, but that wasn't the way I reacted to it.
I would say, just looking at the legacy, I don't think it's been my experience. People don't read this book with, oh my God, this is terrible. Tom and Huck are so cool. I've never heard them classified as that. People love these characters. These are some of the most endearing and beloved white characters in the history of literature, in my opinion.
I don't like either of them. I mean, other than, there's a general way of using children to show cruelty and stuff in literature, and for me, it's very uncomfortable.
Context.
So for me, this may be just personal. They're not beloved characters.
Wow.
I mean, the book is grotesque in many ways. It gets more and more horrible as you go along.
Context of white supremacy. Justice, did you have any other questions you wanted to ask? I want to make sure I'm not leaving you out.
Yep. Excuse me. Have you heard of the term code switching? If so, what does that mean?
Oh, yeah. Code switching is when you're speaking one language like English, and right in the middle of it, you switch into another language like Spanish, and you speak Spanish for a few words in perfect Spanish grammar and pronunciation, and then you switch back out into English. Or you can start in Spanish and do it in the other direction. And so and you can do that, between any two languages. Bilingual people do it all the time.
What are some racist jokes you have come across during your study of language?
Well, the ones that stick in my mind are not ones that I would ever want to repeat to anybody. I'm trying to, I was explaining to Gus earlier that people don't actually tell me a lot of jokes because I'm this sort of pompous-looking old lady, I guess. People see me that way. So I can't come up with any right offhand. I mean, I can think of jokey characters like Speedy Gonzales, or something like that. But I can't think of any jokes.
What is your view on how the system of racism, white supremacy, is maintained, particularly in the United States?
Well, obviously there are very, very, very diverse and powerful strategies involved. I wrote about the way that people use talk to reinforce negative images of people of color without actually having to say, I don't like people of color, or I think people of color are lazy, or I think people of color are sexually loose, or, I think people of color are, careless with their money, or people of color are dirty, or something like that. People have other ways of getting those ideas into the system without overtly saying it. However, as Gus has pointed out, and is very important in the work of Joe Fagan, there are also occasions when white people get together and they say that stuff out loud to one another. I have almost never been present at those occasions, except, many, many years ago with my family. And then, of course, there are, the huge, enormous systems, the system of incarceration, what we see today about the denial of the franchise to people who have felony records, the attempts to require identification to vote in populations who may not own automobiles and so may not have the usual forms of ID. It goes on and on and on, So it's a many-pronged, multi-headed, very complex, very, very powerful system. And, of course, part of the strategy is to deny that it exists and to get angry when people suggest that it exists.
I meant to ask this question earlier, but I forgot. What do you mean when you say people of color, and why don't you say non-white people?
I don't know. I hadn't really thought about it. I mean, I've emphasized that white people are a sort of social construction. I mean, there's all kinds of people who think they're white, who are considered white by other people who 100 years ago were not considered white. That's very well known in scholarship. And so I'm not sure, in thinking about why I would choose to use people of color. That's also, something that's being constructed. People are being, and one of the examples I talk about in the book is the way people of Middle Eastern ancestry have been moved back across the line just in the last 10 years into what I would call this zone of color. To me, I'm not sure, what the implications would be of the choice of saying non-white or saying person of color. I mean, non-white somehow suggests sort of an absence, which I wouldn't want to imply.
What suggestions can you offer to help eliminate the system of racism, white supremacy?
Well, I wish I had some good ideas. I think that people need to be really careful about how they talk. I think white people need to take very seriously when a person of color says, I see racism there, They need to really think about that rather than just saying, oh, you're playing the race card or you're too sensitive or something like that. But white people also need to get involved when they see things that are happening with racist effects, like these crazy new voter registration laws that are coming on, like unjust laws that have the result of imprisoning very, very high numbers of people of color and almost nobody white. Of course, the classic example is the different laws about powder versus crack cocaine. There are many, many, many different things that I think people need to do. But I think that sort of basic civility and taking seriously what people of color say about how they understand the system is probably the first thing that needs to happen.
I do not, I do not have any more questions at this time for you.
Okay,
thanks very much. And Gus, you can go ahead.
Groovy. Context of white supremacy. I will make sure that we talk terms, very important. I think especially one of my recommendations would be non-white people. becoming more precise with the words that they use, really thinking about, is this the most accurate term that I can use to describe what's happening? Also, definitions that, hey, you can give your own definition. If you think as many of the terms that are used, they have been defined to support the system of white supremacy. So sometimes I think redefining terms also is an important aspect of becoming more precise, more skilled with our use of language. I use the term non-white because I think the emphasis, and this is Dr. Robert Jensen, he's been on the program repeatedly, where he says the emphasis should be on white people. White people are causing the problem. The emphasis should be on them, and using non-white, it keeps the focus where it should be, on white people. Does that make sense? Okay.
So you don't worry about the implication of absence or lack or something like that.
What do you mean when you say absence or lack?
Well, like there's some prototypical thing that's white, and all that somebody is who's not that is non, rather than being something else.
Okay. Well, I've heard that before, where people have said it's negating what you're talking about, the absence, the lack. It's self-negating. You're defining yourself against the norm, white, and I've asserted that, unfortunately, it's true. That's the way things are set up. If you are not white, there is an automatic and mostly unsaid negation of your life that is happening every day, every moment, where if you are non-white and especially black, your life is being minimized, whether it's through the mock Spanish, whether it's through films like Con Air, in my opinion, comparisons where black people get compared and represented as two live crew. That sort of thing is happening all the time. So we should just use words that are honest about that and reveal, yes, this is what's going on. My life, my value as a human being is being minimized because I'm not white. That's white supremacy worldwide, and I think we should use terms that, as accurately as possible, convey that. Does that make sense?
Yeah, actually, it's a really interesting point that, since whiteness within white supremacy is a sort of prototype, it sets up this paradox of language where it's very difficult to find a good usage. There's a problem no matter which way you go.
As Dr. Jensen says, the problem, white people, the system of white supremacy. I don't really argue with non-white people if they choose to use people of color, but I would point out if you use people of color, then that means that white people would be colorless, which presents another problem, in my opinion.
Yeah, well, I'm sure you're familiar with the work that says, well, one of the things, that white people think that they're white bread and they don't have any culture and stuff like that. That's another thing that scholars have thought about.
Mm-hmm. I thought this was really important, and it goes back to my definition of white supremacy and saying white people are dedicated to racism, white supremacy, and I've had many white people, they have argued about that and said that they don't like that and they don't think it's true. I think this is one of the most important points in your book, where you point out that more education does not seem to interrupt the circulation of racist ideas. Can you just break that down so our listeners make sure that they understand that?
Yeah, this is part of the part of the myth of the disappearance of white supremacy is the idea that the only people who are still white supremacists, which white people usually defined as believing that the people of color or non-white people, if you like the way Gus talks about it, as are biologically inferior, which I actually think is still around in a much bigger way than most people will admit. But the way that people will sort of say, the reason that people will say, well, there's no racism anymore, is they'll say, well, yeah, there are racists, but they're real uneducated people, or they're crazy people, or they're rural people, they haven't been brought up right or something like that. And so the idea is that then the way to solve whatever the remaining problems of racism are is to educate and to make people more empathetic and make people more cosmopolitan. And this, of course, was for many, many years, and in fact really still is, the main thrust of my professional association, the American Anthropological Association, is to, try to inform people about the meaning of race, the meaning of racism, about white supremacy, about how racism works, and that sort of thing. And I think that, I don't know, I think it might work a little bit sort of on the margins. It might make people a little bit more self-conscious. But the difficulty is that, and you've made many, very good points beyond what I made in the book, that the whole way that white supremacy is embedded in common discourse is really overpowering, and it's very, very difficult to get out of that. And so you may go through one class that will teach you about white supremacy and the realities of race and stuff like that. But then as soon as you go outside that classroom, you're out in that discursive world again. And then one of the other points that I made is that if education, made people less racist, you would expect college campuses to be, quite free of it. But instead, university campuses are sites of some of the most shocking racist incidents that we find today. So, there's something else has to happen. I don't know what it is.
Very important. I hear it's kind of embarrassing would be the best word, is that I hear a lot of people, non-white and white, who assert that the problem is white people just need to be educated. You just need to go and inform them about racism, and that will fix things. And I think that it's, for all the reasons that you just laid out, is absurd to even make that notion. And I think, at least it's been my experience, it's not white people who are confused about racism. If you are a white person, you are supposed to know about racism, white supremacy. Many of
you sure know how to do it. You may not admit that you're doing it, but you do know how.
Even not admitting it, that is a part of knowing.
Oh yeah, that's an important part of it.
Exactly. It's non-white people who don't know about racism who need to be informed. It's been my opinion, clearly, it's the non-white people who are lacking that information. In my opinion, white people learning about racism, white supremacy, it just makes them able to better camouflage their racism so that they're not caught, so that non-white people don't think of them as being a racist. Yeah.
Well, I'm not sure I completely agree with you there, because I'm a great admirer of the scholarship of the Dutch scholar Tim van Dijk, and he always argued that if you really want to know how racism works, he said you ask a sophisticated person of color, because they've had all of the negative experiences and they know what's out there. And so they're your best guides to what's going on. Because it is the case that for a lot of white people, it's interesting. I mean, the fact that white supremacy is invisible, of course, is part of the system, but experientially, it really is invisible. I mean, most people manage to go through huge proportions of their days without noticing the extraordinary disparities in incarceration, for instance, or without being aware of the extraordinary disparities in net worth or infant survival or something like that. These really shocking statistics. People just, they prefer not to know about them, but they truly do not know about them. And I think a lot of non-white people do know about them.
Professor Van Dijk, he was a guest on the program last month. We discussed his work. He's married to a non-white person, and I think I was able to pretty succinctly lay out where I think he presented the same view, that you go to non-white people to learn about racism. I could not disagree more. If non-white people were the experts on racism, white supremacy, we would not be having this discussion. They would have been able to figure out how to stop it. Exactly. If you want to know how the plantation works, you go to the white people. You do not go to the slaves to figure out how the plantation is run. There are some people that called in with questions. I'll go in the order that people called in. prefer questions for the folks who dialed in. Person who dialed in from Massachusetts with a hand up. Person from Massachusetts, did you have a question for Dr. Jane Hill?
Hey guys, how you doing?
Hi.
Greetings. Good to hear from you, sir.
All right. Hi to you, listener. I got a few questions. First, what's your nationality? I mean, not your citizenship. What's your European nationality? Are you German?
Who me? You mean
Yes.
Jane Hills? I'm
Yes.
a white American of multiple kinds of European ancestry, and maybe a little bit of Native American.
Yes. Nowadays, seems that all white people somehow, are Native American. I don't know. But anyways, I want to ask you, how, like, okay, let's say, for example, in my neighborhood, right, I may have a person, right, that I suspect is highly racist, and for some reason, they bending over backwards to, like, try to, to make friends with me, and I'm trying to let them down easy. Which would be the best way to do that? Like, without having to scream at them and say, hey, look, I don't really want your friendship or nothing. Which would be the best way for me to, like, let them down, like, disassociate myself from them slowly but surely. How can I do that?
Well, letting that, I'm sure not an expert in how to do that politely, but let me tell you something. Once I was at a meeting of anthropologists, and there were a lot of African American anthropologists there, and they all sat together, and they didn't invite any of the white people to sit with them. And one very, very distinguished African American anthropologist, Faye Harrison, she said, we're choosy about who we sit with. So maybe you could tell your neighbor, I'm choosy about who I hang with, And I have my friend. Thank you for your interest. I don't know. That's the best I can come up with.
One more question. How can a non-European person, aka white person, which would be the best way for a non-white to identify a hardcore, I would say a hardcore white supremacist? I'm talking about the like the ones that they're most likely to like be violent or very shiesty and terroristic. I mean terroristic in the sense of planning acts of violence against non-whites.
You mean like physical violence kind of stuff?
Physical, yes. It could be directly or indirectly. Could be doing it with their job. Could be that they could be a pharmacist, handling medicine that's going to be given to you. Which way can a non-white person identify a race that might be dangerous, but it's very good at disguising?
I think that's a really, really good question. I mean, obviously that's a very important question, and I wish I could help you there. I think you have to go with your guts. If you feel bad, don't deal with them.
Yeah, so no answer. Hey, Gus, what you were saying about the plane and the names, dog and ball. It's funny though, because ball is something that you smack around, you slam around, and it's funny that they drop pinball up the plane, like without mercy. Also, earlier today before the show, man, I ran into this one of them sites. What a coincidence, right? They had a lot of jokes, racist jokes, right, about all the non-whites, right? I mean, they went on segments, every so-called race of non-whites, right? And, man, one thing that these, white racist jokes, right, they have a lot of violence in them.
Yeah,
all
they
of
do.
them have something to do with violence. These racist people have no problems. I mean, the way I see these folks, they have no problems taking non-whites, degutting you. I mean, chopping you up. I mean, it's fun. It's fun. And guess what? They seem to have be even more violent towards towards black people than any other group of non-whites. And the jokes, the violence was expressed deeply. Deeper when it came to blacks. It was like almost every joke that was pointed towards blacks, it had violence in it, cruel. Man, but thank you, but no thank you. It's really, your answers. Honestly, they weren't helpful. Helpful. But yeah, thank you.
Well, I'm sorry you had to hear those jokes.
If you could send me the website, sir, I said repeatedly, you should not, we, non-white people, not being emotional, doing exactly what you did, sir, studying, looking for patterns. What does this reveal about the racist code? And that's the exact same thing Dr. Fagan pointed out on the program. I think in the study that he did, Two-Faced Racism, the data that they had, I think he said about 75% of the jokes were directed at black people. They do have them for all groups of non-white people, but it seems like black people get the bulk of the terrorism and violence that those jokes, are making fun about. It seems like most of it's directed at black people. The person who called in from Texas, did you have a question for Dr. Jane Hill?
Good evening, everybody. Can I be heard?
Yes, sir.
I can hear you.
Okay. When it comes to racist jokes against black folk in America and the violence in these jokes, as the previous caller stated, a simple check in American history will show you that much of what is joked about was actually done to people of African descent all over the United States. And these were held as events. If you can go to websites like withoutsanctuary.org, you will see unhooded men, women, and children of European descent standing under a burning African American. And the looks on their faces would be one of jubilation and celebration. So I would say, I would ask, could the refinement that we've seen in language in discussions of race after the civil rights era be nothing more than a strategy to get non-white people to be comfortable with their subjugation? That's my question. Thank you.
Well, I haven't actually, certainly in order for racism, in order for white supremacy to really work, you do want, a white supremacist would want that comfort with subjugation. And so you make a really, really interesting point. Maybe this idea that, well, at least we're not standing around laughing while we lynch people anymore, we're just making jokes on the internet, and so you shouldn't worry too much. That might be one of these strategies that Justice was asking about earlier. But, of course, we still do see incidents of terrible violence against black people. The dragging incident in Texas a few years ago is the one, of course, that always comes to mind, but I think there have been others.
Frederick Jermaine Carter, James Craig Anderson, just two of the more recent ones that are coming to mind for me. Mississippi.
That whole incident around the school in Mississippi was extraordinary. Yeah.
Well, I wanted to, before we wrap up, if anyone that dialed in, if you have questions, if you're on the TalkShoe line, *8. If you're on the Free HD line, *6. Not doing a last minute thing, so if you got a question or think you might have a question, get your hand up now. I found two racist jokes earlier today that I think they hit on exactly what the previous caller was just talking about. And I want to just kind of decode, if we could do some unpacking of what these jokes are trying to communicate. I think this is really important, and I would encourage non-white people Don't try not to let your emotions take over. If it's a racist joke or whatever that's being shared, really try to pay attention to see what's being communicated, what sort of racist coding is being packaged in that joke. The first joke, why do niggers cry during sex? The mace. What are your thoughts on that one, Dr. Hill?
Wow. Well, that one picks up, a very, very common theme of sort of sexual depravity, the idea that you could be, go out and commit a crime and then come back and have sex, while the mace was still in your eyes kind of thing. I mean, that's a very, very compact way of combining the sort of criminality image and the sexual depravity image in one little teeny few words. That's quite extraordinary.
Mm, I agree. I was actually the way it made sense to me, and I think what you said is totally legit. Just the way it was making sense to me, I was thinking, oh wow, they're just the whole raping black male thing all over again. That he's raping someone. It's not even sex. He's raping someone, and it's continuing.
And then getting maced at the same time, or
right,
something?
right. That's what I was thinking. But I think what you said is legit. It's just it was a little different than what I was thinking when I first heard it. I think both of those is.
Well, both of them work. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, this is the second one. How do you stop a nigger from drowning? Take your foot off the back of his head. Thoughts on that one, Dr. Hill?
That's a sort of complicated one. I mean, my first thought is something like, well, is this person so submissive and so dumb that he wouldn't turn around and take your foot off the back of his head? Or, I mean, how? That one, I got to tell you, I don't get it. What are your thoughts?
This is an interesting moment for me, where the white person is having trouble decoding the racist joke, and me, the black person, is being called to try to figure out what's going on. My view as a black person, I was thinking it reminded me. I think so many people, Cynthia McKinney, Neely Fuller Jr., so many of our previous guests have used the metaphor racism, white supremacy. White people have their foot on our neck. And that was the immediate thought that popped in my head when I heard this joke. And it's,
well, it's interesting. I mean, that's almost a joke that comes out of the world of the oppressed, which is one of the reasons that it doesn't, that I didn't get it. I mean, what do you think? Maybe that?
A joke that comes. Can you just break that down a little bit? You said a joke that comes out of.
Yeah, that comes out of that sense of oppression. Okay. Because generally speaking, jokes, those kinds of jokes don't confess to having any role in anybody drowning or anything like that.
That is interesting.
I mean, that almost sounds like a kind of joke that, oppressed people would tell one another, as a sort of almost a parodic, sardonic spin on the kinds of jokes that white people tell.
Interesting. I'll have to think about that for a bit. Listeners as well, I'll have to think about that for a bit.
I remember one, okay, that somebody told me once that isn't too awful to tell, okay. Years ago, I heard this one of, how do we know that Adam was a white person? Because you can't take a rib away from a nigger.
Wow. I think I've heard that one before.
And see, you're laughing. You can't help it. But, it seems like that's the kind, the kind that it only has in it the negative stereotype. In this case, uncontrolled appetites or something like that. I happen to be very fond of barbecue ribs myself, but But the other one, the one that has the stuff about the foot on the neck, that it doesn't sound like the kind of joke a white person would tell. But anyway, we'll think about that.
Right on. Yeah, I will think about it. I hadn't thought of it from that perspective, but it sounds logical. I have to give that some thought. My immediate thoughts on the foot on the head comment was I think white people know. I think I've said, in my opinion, in the racist jokes, white people are a lot more honest. If you really want to hear white people speaking honestly about racism, look at some of the racist jokes. And I think white people, they kind of, they make fun. They enjoy this sort of commentary and talking about drowning a black person, that sort of thing, and reveling. Yes, we got our foot on his head, on their neck, yes, and we're drowning them.
You might be right. Yeah.
But
as I told you earlier, people tend not to talk that way around me. I don't know why.
We had a final call. I don't know if they have a racist joke to share. Caller, did you have a question for Dr. Jane Hill in California? Caller in California, did you have a question for Dr. Jane Hill? Not hearing you.
Hello?
Okay, we can hear you now.
Cool. Yeah, great show. I've been listening to it for like a couple months, and I really enjoy it. I just wanted to say that was I like that. I hear a lot of like synonyms for like when people are speaking about like talking about us, like black people or whatever, and they always want to use like a different word like every time they talk about like like African American and person of color and black, and it's just like kind of like like very trivializing and very subjectifying or whatever you call it. But yeah, I don't know. We just need to bring some humanity back to the whole to the world, So good job.
Interesting.
That one was for you.
Okay. Hold on. Thank you for the comments, sir. Glad you've been listening into the program. The book again, The Everyday Language of White Racism, Dr. Jane Hill. Learned quite a bit. As I said, I'm always interested in books. The person in Massachusetts, did you have a final question for Dr. Hill? Caller in Massachusetts.
Yeah, Gus, can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
Yes.
About that website, right? It's called the Insurgent War Racist Jokes. The Insurgent War Racist Jokes, and one of the jokes is says, what do you call the New Orleans Superdome full of milk? Cocoa Puffs. That's one of the racist jokes in there.
I had that one.
Yeah, but I'm not going through all of them right now because I'm not on the computer right now. But yeah, that's the name of the site, the Insurgent War Racist Jokes. That's it. All right, peace, brother.
Yes, sir. Thank you for hearing it. I actually had the punchline on that one before he said it. I don't think I heard that one before, but I said Cocoa Puffs about 2 seconds before he got it out. Thank you for sharing. Thoroughly enjoyed the broadcast and reading the book. We'll definitely be on the lookout if you have more material. I'm actually going to attempt to contact some of the folks that you mentioned. The female in Australia, Anna, I don't want to say her last.
Yeah.
Yes. What is the articles that she did on fair and justice?
Well, she wrote a whole book on sort of this world English that she talks about, that she argues has sort of cultural presuppositions in it that makes it quite difficult for English-speaking people to be understood by people who come from other languages. And I used to, when I was teaching, I had all these bibliography things right up here. I think the best thing to do, Gus, is I've got your email, and I can look on Amazon.com, and I can pull that right up and send you the name of the book that has that chapter.
Outstanding. I would appreciate it.
It's a book that has the word English in the title.
Okay. I will be on the lookout. Maybe we can get her to be a guest on the program.
She's a real interesting person.
Wow. As I said, thank you a ton. Learned a lot. Appreciate you sharing a bit of your Monday evening with us.
I learned a lot from talking to you, too. Thanks a lot.
For sure. Take care.
You too. Bye-bye.
Goodbye. Context of white supremacy, our guest, Dr. Jane Hill. We will do a quick commercial. We'll come right back. Closing thoughts, if anyone has anything they want to get in. We'll be back on Wednesday. Another white person. We'll have back-to-back white people on the program. Professor Bruce Baum. He'll be our guest for Wednesday. His book, The Fall of the Caucasian Race. Looking forward to that on Wednesday, but we'll take a quick commercial break. Be right back. Context of white supremacy.
RacismDaily.com, your number one source for global news reports on race, racism, and overt actions of white supremacy. From Asia to the Americas, to Europe, to Australia, to Africa, racism is not a thing of the past, it is our current reality. Be informed, be globally informed. You should be the first to know. RacismDaily.com, RacismDaily.com, RacismDaily.com.
Is racism hurting you? On issues of race, are you unable to speak, think, and act with clarity and confidence? Are you tired of laughing when nothing is funny, smiling when you are not happy, agreeing when you really disagree? At counterracism.com, you can learn specific strategies and techniques to counter the behaviors of the people who practice racism in all areas of activity, using words correctly, following counter-racist logic, even counter-racist science projects designed to reveal what racism is, how it works, and how to counter it. The open source code writing format allows you to pick and choose from a variety of counter-racist suggestions so you can produce the code that works for you. Stop by counterracism.com today and help replace racism with justice.
That's counter-racism.com.
Do you need a one-stop shop for all of your multimedia needs? Triumphant Multimedia is a skilled team of professionals with a passion for great marketing and chic design. Our specialties include consulting, brand development, copywriting, and creative graphic design that's second to none. We also offer photography, photo retouching, videography, and video editing. At Triumphant Multimedia, our goal is to provide highly effective creative solutions built to suit any individual need or budget. Give us a call at 678-732-8067 or check us out online at trimultimedia.com.
Hi everybody, welcome. This is Justice with the C.O.W.S radio program. If you want to learn about, understand, and counter racism, white supremacy, be sure not to miss a C.O.W.S episode. We keep them jammed packed with constructive information to sharpen your use of words to help eliminate the system of racism, white supremacy, ASAP. Also, for more information on racism, white supremacy, and to invest in my counter-racist efforts, please visit my blog, justdojustice.blogspot.com.
You're just saying just buckets and buckets of words.
Yo, this is Wade, one half of the Black Twins. And I want y'all to check something out. Our latest project, Double Consciousness, the mixed message. This will be dropping October 2nd, 2011, featuring various audio from Umar Abdullah Johnson and Dr. Kambom, just to name a few. You can download this at www.gagmusicroom.bandcamp.com and at stlouismixtapes.com. That's STLmixtapes.com. Replace white supremacy with justice now.
This mixtape is only for victims of racism and white supremacy.
Don't do that, baby.
Context of white supremacy. Did you hear? People say they don't often listen to the words. So I just want to repeat. I'm like a dog in heat. That's the image when questioned about that, and that perhaps being a deliberate act of racism. And she said, I wanted something that would be memorable. I wanted to use an example that would stick in their mind. Two Live Crew, the album she references in her book, As Nasty as We Want to Be, that's the image that you want to burn into the memory of someone who takes her class. This is the association that I want to make sure that is indelible on your brain about black people. Like a dog in heat, as nasty as we want to be. At any rate, as I said, we'll be back on Wednesday, 8 p.m. Eastern, 5 p.m. Pacific. Professor Bruce Baum, The Rise and Fall of the Caucasian Race. Full title, The Rise and Fall of the Caucasian Race. I think 818 might have been responsible for this as well. She shared quite a few books that were online that you could download. I've said consistently to not purchase books that are authored by white people. If you want to read Dr. Jane Hill's book, it is available for download. I think 818 put the link on my Facebook page. You should be able to just scroll down, download it if you want to check it out. As I said, the examples that she includes about the way that white people can devalue language of non-white people to practice racism. I thought that was very constructive. She has some other parts as well that just talk about ways white people use words to further practice and refine white supremacy, and especially not calling out other white people. Very important to not, as I said, same thing with Penn State. We can't tell because we'll all get in trouble. Same thing. And you should connect that. If we want to talk about leaving an indelible memory, connect that. Penn State racism, Penn State pedophilia racism. Those should be connected in your brain. More to come on that as we proceed. Dr. Welsing had a lot to say about that. When I spoke with her last week, she had been following the Penn State case intensely. This Thursday, so-called Thanksgiving, Dr. Welsing will be back, and I'm sure she will have a comment or three about what happened at Penn State and how that relates to white supremacy. I have a news report. Justice, you can message me if you have a news report, then we'll have two of them. Listen, I had actually meant to share this quite a while ago. This is the soldier, when I made the comment about soldiers cutting off fingers and body parts. This just came out in the last 2 weeks. This is on the BBC. Calvin Gibbs admits taking fingers off Afghans' bodies. Two former colleagues of Staff Sergeant Calvin Gibbs testified to Army investigators giving evidence about the alleged self-styled kill team. An Army staff sergeant charged with killing 3 Afghan civilians admits taking fingers off bodies as war trophies, his lawyer says. Staff Sergeant Calvin Gibbs, 26, maintains that he was not involved in the killings and has pleaded not guilty to 16 criminal charges. He is one of 5 soldiers charged. In March 2011, photographs were published showing the soldiers posing with the corpses of Afghan civilians they had allegedly just killed. The admission that Sergeant Gibbs took fingers off the 3 victims and either kept them as war trophies or gave them to others involved in the killings came during Monday's opening statements from Sergeant Gibbs' lawyer, Phil Stackhouse. Mr. Stackhouse told jurors at the court-martial that Sergeant Gibbs believed 3 killings had been legitimate engagements and that he had been conspired against by his co-defendants. Military prosecutor Captain Dan Mazzone said Sergeant Gibbs had killed simply because he wanted to kill. He told jurors that the accused also led a group in assaulting a soldier who reported drug use in the unit and that he threatened the same soldier. This platoon is out of control, Captain Mazzone said. He sees weak leaders. He sees an opportunity. He sees soldiers who are willing to cross the line. 3 within the platoon have pleaded guilty and agreed to testify that it was Sergeant Gibbs' idea to kill civilians and stage the deaths to make them appear to have been combatants. Sergeant Gibbs is accused of providing a grenade used in January 2010 to kill the first victim, an unarmed farmer in a field in Kandahar, to shooting or tossing grenades the next 2 in February and May of that year. He faces up to life in prison without parole if convicted. The title of this report again, Calvin Gibbs admits to taking fingers off Afghans' bodies. You could probably replace Afghan with non-white. This is on the BBC. BBC, you can check this out. Continued racism, white supremacy. I had a counter-racist. I see folks have called it. The person that called in from Massachusetts. Sir, did you have something you wanted to add in? Caller in Massachusetts, did you have a comment, question? We're not hearing you, sir. Did you maybe press your mute button, or your line should be open? Person that called.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Yeah, you was right. I had my mute button on. Yes, I want to say something serious, man. 'Cause I've been listening to you, and I remember you always say that this anti-racist whites, right? How they dangerous, and I've been noticing that for a long time, man. I'm gonna try to break it down to you as much as I can. Most of what I learned, I don't read no books, man. I see these people and I see how they operate. If you want to see that double talk that they use, that codified language, just watch Fox News. Watch any news channel, and you see them using that indirect talk. That's if you wanna learn how they talk, just watch the news. Now, another thing I noticed. A few weeks ago, you had a white caller, and he said something about he was talking about how he was he was digging into Black history and how he was so touched about everything that Black people gone through. I was just waiting for him, and I'm going to explain to you why I'm saying this. I was just waiting for him to say something about another non-white group. Then Then he said something about the Hispanics. Oh, no, now we focus on the Hispanics. Now, I'm going to tell you this. This I've been noticing for years. I've seen that in D.C., Virginia, and Massachusetts. These so-called anti-racists, right, they infiltrate a group of non-whites, right? And I've seen this happening. I've been in circles where it's like all Hispanics, and then you got these so-called anti-racist white people, usually through charity programs, helping the so-called Latinos. But while they helping them, they teaching them to be very unfriendly towards blacks and teaching them that blacks are the problem. You see what I'm saying? And I've seen them doing the same thing. You see, they come in here, and that's what they're going to tell you. They're going to come here and try to tell you, hey, you know what? No, we cool with you. But this other groups are non-whites. You see what I'm saying? And that's how they work. That's how these 10%, this small group of, that's why we call them devils, man, because of the way they operate. That's how this small group of this minority in this planet keep all non-white people all over the planet fighting. I'm going to give you an example. All right? For example, do you know that black people can be honorary whites too? Not here. But, for example, I got a brother in Panama, right? He's working in the canal down there, right? There's a lot of Europeans all over. They don't tell you about the immigration or Europeans. Europeans, especially from Holland, have taken all of South America. They got the windmills, like, over there. You got people from France. Got black Panamanians building all kinds of skyscrapers to bring more Europeans to move into Panama. Okay, you know these white people, they've been in Panama forever, right? They're all over the world. Anyways, now, my brother got a so-called black American who's his boss down there. He's got no problem. As a matter of fact, he's cool with him, and he's glad to be working with him. But down there, the pressure is not on the black Americans. The pressure is on the people in Panama because that's who they're trying to colonize. You see what I'm saying? So wherever they got a group of non-whites that's trying to rebel against white supremacy, that's a group that's targeted. For example, I saw a brother from Jamaica. He had a long life dream to go to Zimbabwe. When he went to Zimbabwe, what did he find? What did he find? He found people from India working with the whites Zimbabweans, or people from Zimbabwe, and they were exploiting the black Africans. So in other words, these whites, they work with all of us to put us against each other. Like you say, especially those so-called anti-racists, they are agents. They get into these groups to so-called try to help them, but while they help this group, they're going to turn them against this other group. That's why today you got what they call in South America, la guerra a los perros, the war of the dogs. They got all those whites on this planet like dogs. And in South America, when they call you a dog, that's like you're an animal. They got the war of the dogs, where whites don't no longer have to fight each other. They got non-white people fighting and killing each other for them. And what you're saying that these anti-racists are dangerous? Yes, I'm with you on that. They're dangerous. I've been seeing that for a long, long time. And with that, I'm not taking no more of your time, man.
Thank you for sharing that information. I think that's real important. Important pattern. Talk about that. Picking out trends, because white people, they codify it. They find something that works, they will share it, and other white people will do the same thing. That so-called anti-racist white people going in to help a group of non-white people, and at the same time getting them to be anti-black. Well, we'll help you, but those niggers. Consistent pattern, and another thing I've seen with the so-called anti-racists, they will come in, yeah, we're against racism, we're down, we want to help non-white people, and they will make sure to insert, yeah, and we're also homosexuals, they are mistreated too. You want to make sure that, we got our rainbow flags, and we'll get you a rainbow t-shirt. We're all down. Homosexuality, woohoo, we should support gay marriage, and all, going to Penn State. That's another pattern that I've noticed. Those so-called anti-racist white people, extremely dangerous. You really be suspicious of every white person, but especially the so-called anti-racist whites. very slick. They're able to use words very well, very convincing, great powers of persuasion with words, so-called anti-racist white people.
Can I say something else, Gus?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, the thing they not telling people, right? The immigration, these people, man, right under our noses, they are colonizing this continent all over again. They telling you about the immigration of non-whites, and this woman, she don't tell me, right? I got blood. I know I had ancestors that I saw their faces and I seen how they looked, and I don't even have to go that far, man. My grandfather didn't even speak no European language. He spoke a dialect that came from here. Now I got all these Europeans. Every time you talk to them, they're like, "Yeah, I'm Irish, and I'm half Scottish, and I'm part Native American." That's the way it's still in the land. That's why I asked for nationality, because the only people that can't have a true American nationality are people who are tied to this land by law. She don't have no card or passport on her or an ID that says I'm an American national. She can have an ID that says I'm a United States citizen. But she cannot have that because her nationality, all of them are tied. They here through law, but they are on the British rule. They are colonials. You see what I'm saying? Half of them, they ain't even the colonials, because the colonies, there were 13 little colonies in front of the eastern shore. All the rest of the land, these people, they did their terrorism. Kill, steal, cheat, and lie. And that's how they got the rest of the land. Then they opened the land for millions and millions of more Europeans. You see what I'm saying? And I did the research, man, in the past 20 years. Something like 40 million Europeans have migrated to South and Central America, and they've taken it over. They're not saying that. And I don't know how many of them. I just did the research because I'm like, man, they on the news, right? But then I do my research, man. I do my research about what's going on down there, right? So I'm like, they saying all this in the news, but, man, I'm seeing, like, my brother, he in Panama, like I told you, because they rebuilding the canal and so on, so he's working down there. And I'm like, man, then the Europeans, guess what they did? They had the black Panamanians working for them, right? They didn't pay them for, like, 6 months. The black Panamanians went and they did a protest. Man, they killed one of them with real bullets. And guess what? These were non-whites because, like I'm saying, they got us fighting the war of the dogs where we killing each other worldwide. They don't even have to do the work. But these people, now if you go to Panama, you find people from France, mostly from Holland. And you can find you see, like, I even go on the internet, right, and I see all the signs, the Scottish Rite. You know, now you're dealing with those Freemasons, those devil worshippers, Scottish people. They all over South and Central America. You see what I'm saying? And they taking the land from those people. And that's why a lot of these people are moving up here. And they not telling nobody that. Because in the meantime, while they telling you, be careful with the Mexicans, that they telling the Mexicans all the time, that's what the brother said, the Native American brother, he said, yeah, they mix with Europeans, but they are cousins because you can still see the brown on their skin. Most of them, some of them are straight or European. But these Europeans telling the Mexicans that they got no ties to this continent, but then, yeah, I bet you she's probably as white as Snow White, and she's sitting there telling me she's part Native American, right? Like they all say. Now, man, I got lost, man. But it's hard to break all this down, man, because I be trying to break it down. I might get confused, but, I'm just like you, man. White supremacy got my head all messed up.
I'm definitely in that boat. I don't know if you ever find a non-white person whose head has not been messed up by white people. Please let me know. I would love to talk to that person. I just wanted to make sure that I got in. I think for victims who are listening to the program, I think it's best to kind of keep in mind Mr. Fuller when he says the government, the nation, is the nation of white supremacy. The government of white supremacy. Worldwide, they dominate the whole planet. If that means We want to repopulate South America, and we're going to move 40 people that we say are white. We're going to move them to that area of South America. That's what's going to happen. If they say, this certain group of non-white people, we're going to allow them to come to the area of the world known as the United States. That's what will happen. Just having that in mind, this entire planet is the nation of white supremacy. They are in charge. Any movements of people and all that stuff that's going on, white people will make the decisions about that. I could be incorrect, but I've concluded that's pretty much the way it goes down on this planet under white supremacy 2011. If that's incorrect, let me know. But I do think that information is important to know about large, you said millions, 40 million white people repopulating the area of the world known as South America. Definitely something to keep in mind. White people, I could easily see them shifting and deciding that they're going to go to different places. They want to repopulate a certain area. I'd be curious to know which so-called country in South America that they're going to, if it's Brazil or Argentina, where specifically.
Gus, can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, just like at the same time that I saw that thing, right, and then again, they were using that indirect language, right? Like I tell you on BBC, they had the headline was Europeans, white people, no longer the minority in Brazil, right? And then they had the picture of a black woman holding a baby, and then when I click on the thing, right, so I can keep reading the rest, right, they had more pictures of black. There were like 3 black women and like 3 so-called like mixed Indian, so-called Indian and black women, and all of them were holding babies. That's their white supremacist language right there. They telling white people, we are the minority now. Look at all these babies. We got to do something. We got to take these babies out. We got to do whatever we have to do. That's the message right there. That's that language she's talking about. Now,
hang on one second.
There
was another caller. He had a hand up. I just wanted to make sure I got him in. If you can stay on the line, I'll get your final comment in as well. That picture, just so folks know, so they can see the picture that you're talking about, it's on the BBC Brazil 2010 census. Shows changing race balance, and it has a photograph of a lot of black non-white females, and they're all holding small children. If you want to check that picture out, and this is, in my opinion, this is motivation to practice racism, white supremacy. We got to come up with some fertility drugs so that these black people are not producing babies. We got to get them to get abortions. We got to get them to be gay. Anything we can do to curb population tailoring, I think is Mr. Fuller's term. The caller in Texas. You had a hand up. Did you have a question or comment? Caller in Texas.
Yes, I just want to say I appreciate brother from Massachusetts for the information he's dropping. It just gives black people, non-white people, more avenues for research, and we need to share more information like this. And I was just going to say for all of the non-white people who believe that they're doing whatever you can to appear non-threatening to white people is the way to go. I mean, Brother Tiger Woods, victim of racism and white supremacy, he's been caught with the Fuzzy Lizella fried chicken thing, the lynching in the back alley thing, and his caddy, with your, black ass thing, And what you find is that after each one of these incidents, is not the white person apologizing profusely for this. It's Tiger Woods having to apologize for the white people for what they're doing to him. So it is quite interesting once you start looking at it. When you start, as Brother Edward Williams said, once you start seeing what you're looking at, things become quite clear. And with that, I'll mute my mic.
Mm-hmm. She actually touched on that point in her book, Dr. Jane Hill, Suspected Racist, who was with us today, where she said that she mentioned just one of the many incidents that Tiger Woods, where he's been victimized. She was talking about Fuzzy Zeller, where the fried chicken and collard greens comment. I remember, I had forgotten it because it was so long ago, but I remember when that incident happened, they fussed at him, and she pointed that out in the book. They got mad at him because they said he took too long to accept Fuzzy Zeller's apology. I think she said in the book that I think he made the comment on Sunday, and then 3 days later, Tiger Woods accepted his apology and said, he knows him and blah, blah, blah. I remember that. It was on a plethora of news outlets where they were mad at him and saying it's Tiger Woods' fault. He's playing this whole thing out. It was nothing serious in the first place. He just made a dumb comment, and he's taking all this time to forgive him. That's just playing the whole thing out, make it take longer. Where the victim got blamed for being victimized. Victim of white terrorism. Excellent point, caller in Texas.
Gus, can I finish saying what I was saying?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, I just want to say that right after I checked that out about the Brazil thing, right? The so-called Europeans not no longer being the majority, right? I researched some more things in Brazil because I had done a lot of research on Brazil, right? I have found places where these people got the colonies over there with their windmills, just like Holland, and the non-whites aren't allowed there. Just like in Argentina, that's a free haven for all the racist white supremacy, especially all the ex-Nazis and all. That's where they at. White people help them. Also, right after that, I went in and did some research. They had these white supremacists, straight up white supremacists with the Nazi flags and all that. They went down there to join the Europeans in so-called Brazil, and the Europeans in Brazil had the Brazilian flag. And the white supremacists from here, and they had a white supremacist party, all the family, the children, and all that. My point is, these people know what they do. It doesn't matter if they speak a different language, whether they're here or they in Brazil. They're here, they descendants of British, Irish, or whatever. They down there, they descendants of the Portuguese or Spanish, Europeans too. They know each other, and they know who's the enemy. They know that they are, what they call themselves? The allies. They're their allies. They know, hey, you down? You down with what? Oppressing non-white people? Yep, we in the same club. You know what I'm saying? They were down there having their party. And that's the thing that our people, we are not able to break. We do not get along with each other. It's like you from the East Coast, I'm from the West Coast. Our people, even in a 4-block radius, man, they can't get along with their own people. And that's the only way. That's why I said the other day, the only way that we non-whites are going to be able to put an end to the system of global white supremacy is by all of us working together. Why is that? We don't have to go to bed with each other or brush our teeth together when we wake up in the morning. But the point is, for every white person that supports the system of white supremacy, you got 10 non-whites that are willing to die to uphold that system of white supremacy. That's why when you see the system of white supremacy at work, and it works, you see Asiatic people helping them, you see black people helping them, you see so-called brown people helping them, even Native Americans help them. You'll never see a white supremacist. You look at the Chinese army. Tell me how many white faces you're going to see fighting for the Chinese army. But you go and see a white supremacist anywhere on this planet, oppressing a non-white, stealing and killing from them, and you will see a non-white with them, helping them. So they got our own people. So we're gonna have to get together. You know what I'm saying? And work together, learn to work together, because this is global. This is global. We just think in the neighborhood. White people are all over the world. It's a global system. You say it all the time, and we still focus just on the neighborhood. You know that in South America, they got their, even though those, in most of them countries, Europeans are the minority. But all they need to do, the people down there get out of place, all they need to do is make a phone call their white brothers around the world. They'll send them arms, they'll send them whatever to take care of the problem right away. Right away. That's why whenever you get a president down there that's not a European, problems start. He's no good, he's a dictator, blah, blah, blah. Look at the Chinese man that they had as president in Peru. He ended up in jail. While in Peru, they had centuries of European white supremacists running that country and having them people down there as slaves. They got the first person of non-European blood who is Bolivian indigenous Evo Morales. First, man, that man couldn't even walk on the. He had to walk on the gutter, he couldn't even walk on the sidewalk before he became the president. They had only Europeans as president. The first so-called indigenous Bolivian to be the president of Bolivia, he becomes a dictator right away. So this is global, like you saying, it's global. And if we think that only this little group is going to work for that, and it's going to change this, no, man, it's going to have to take, because they, like, for example, in those racist jokes, you can see that they got all these groups that they targeted, no white. But what they do, they don't never go against all the groups. That's why we can't see the white supremacists fighting all of us, because usually they will target one group and then use the other groups of non-whites to help them to carry on the white supremacy agenda. And then once they get done with that group, they move on to the next group. You see, that's how they keep doing, man. That's what I'm saying. The only way that's going to stop is when all non-white people, those that are away on this planet, because this is global. It's not just the hood. It's not just here. It's like you always say, it's a global system. The day when all non-white people on this planet say that this is enough, we're not going to deal with these people no more, because the main thing that keeps them alive is not us fighting them. It's us collaborating with them. You see, it's not even fighting them so much. It's us supporting them. Every time you go out and you put your money in their hand, you support them. It's like I was telling my son when he asked me to get a pizza. I'm like, man, you know what that Italian man going to do, man? I'm like, you fired him. He's probably going to send his son to school. He's teaching him right now that when he grows, he's going to be a non-white killer. And when he grows up, he's probably going to, for his 15th birthday, he's going to give him a gun. And then he's going to teach him to go and kill non-white people. And not only that, this man, in that store, he gets his products from Rome. Now he gets his product from a company, and that company probably sponsors the killing of non-white people around the planet. So you supporting the same people that's killing you. And my son is only 5 years old. So the main thing that we have to do so much is not fighting, because a lot of our people think it's fighting them. The first thing we have to do is stop helping them to kill ourselves and kill non-white people. That's the first thing we have to do. Stop collaborating with them. Peace, brother.
Thank you for sharing the information. I totally agree. I think that has been said on the program about not helping white people. Really got to take that to heart. I know it bothered some people. That's one that, I mean, it really goes against the grain of our training, the way we have been groomed under their system to assist white people. I mean, that's in all their movies that they show. That is what our programming has guided us to do. Look for ways that we can get on their good side, help them out, anything we can do to collaborate with their system. That's the way we have been programmed to function, and we're really going to have to invest a lot of time and energy in breaking that. Just little things that you can do, just changing your behavior so that you try as much as possible to the best of your ability to not help white people. And I certainly echo the sentiments about thinking globally, really universally, but not getting trapped into just being stuck on your block, your state, your coast, even your quote-unquote nation. Really thinking in global terms. There's non-white people all over the world. If there's no non-white people in your immediate, 50-mile radius who want to talk to you about racism and white supremacy, I'm quite certain you will be able to find non-white people all over the planet who would be willing to dialogue with you. Just really keep a global perspective in mind, particularly if you're doing things, if you're writing books, essays, if you blog, radio program, anything, if you're doing a film, really try to keep that in mind so that you get as wide a non-white audience as possible. Even if you just say, forget all non-white people, I just want to target black people. Well, it's black people all over the world. That really try to the best of your ability to keep that in mind. I think that is something that is another glaring deficiency. As you said, white people, they think globally about their team, coordinating their efforts globally. Non-white people, we don't do that. As you said, we just kind of stay in conflict with black people across the street from us, much less black people, 10,000 miles away from us. So definitely think globally and do as much as you can to not help white people, and look for ways where you can work with other non-white people to do something constructive. All outstanding suggestions. Caller from Massachusetts. I guess I'll make sure I get in. We have a few minutes left before the program wraps up. In addition to us being back on Wednesday, Professor Bruce Baum, white male, suspected racist, looking forward to discussing his book. Quick point that I wanted to get in. There was a question. I failed to get it in. It was a female listener investor. She emailed the question to me, but I didn't get it until last minute. Hopefully I can ask the white person on Wednesday. But the question she wanted to ask was, what does Dr. Jane Hill, a white woman, what does she do when she encounters a non-white person who is confused about racism, white supremacy? That was the question she wanted to get in. I would have appreciated hearing her comment to that, because she tried to assert that non-white people are the experts on racism, that, those are the people that you want to talk to if you want to get information about how white supremacy works. I could not disagree more. I think that is totally inaccurate, and I think that's just another one of the untruths, lies that white people pass along, that, to make us feel good and to make us think that we're informed, and that the problem is that white people are ignorant. That is total foolishness and white supremacy. White people are not ignorant at all. White people are the experts on racism. Non-white people, we're playing catch up. But hopefully I can get that question out on the Wednesday program about what a white person does when they encounter a non-white person who's confused about racism, or more confused, maybe I'll say. In addition, and it kind of is echoing exactly on what caller in Massachusetts said, if you are a non-white person, if you are less confused about racism, white supremacy, you really have got to make an effort to share that information with as many other non-white people as you possibly can. It really cannot be. Neely Fuller Jr., he has that term in the code book for a reason, greatest spectators. He has that term in the code book where he says non-white people, we just kind of sit by. Because of racism, white people are totally to blame for this condition, but greatest spectators. And saying, well, we just kind of sit around and observe, watch, and maybe comment on what's happening around us, what white people are doing, what non-white people are doing. If you are a victim of white supremacy, you have an understanding to some degree of what's happening, you really have got to make a tremendous effort to share that information with as many non-white people as you possibly can. In fact, I would even attempt to codify that. I think we should all have a goal. Minimum. It can't just be each one teach one. That's not going to work for us. We have the problems that we are facing are far too great. It's got to be each one teach as many as you possibly can. I was thinking minimum 1,000. Like, that's got to be the goal. If you have non-white children, the goal, get at least 1,000 non-white people that you share information with and get them to be a little more informed about white supremacy, and codifying more informed, maybe 15 basic principles that this person, they have a solid understanding, like they can explain it to somebody else. Non-white people can't be racist. That's definitely got to be on the list. No sex with white people under any circumstances. That's definitely got to be on the list. The only race, the white race. I think that should definitely be on the list. And you can go down. I mean, it's United Independence. You can come up with your own. Maybe you think there should be 20 things. Maybe you think there should be 30 things. Maybe you think it should be 5 things. But just finding a way to codify information, sharing it with other non-white people, and having a high number, as many as you can. Be creative. I mean, you can have a blog. That's easy. It's free to have a blog. You can make money running a blog. Finding a way to get information out to other non-white people, because white people are going to be relentless in their pursuit of getting misinformation to victims. White people are not going to take a rest. They're going to be on their job 24/7, and they work double time on holidays. They're going to have television going. newspapers, magazines, video games, as much as they possibly can to keep us confused, so that even if that victim does get some constructive information, they will immediately be bombarded by, oh, they're good white people. We got anti-racist Timothy Wise, and it'll be tons of confusion just waiting for you to finish your sentence about how we're in a system of white supremacy to come and erode all that. So you really got to be on the grind. And I know as victims, it's hard. The plantation ties up a lot of our time, but if you can codify, if I got to be on my job 40 hours a week for white people, I'm going to try to dedicate at least 22 hours to doing something constructive towards counter-racism. If it's working on my blog, if it's doing some reading, if it's a book group where I just meet with other black people, other non-white people, and we discuss a book on racism and white supremacy, something. It's really got to be something where you're not just spectating, where I listen to Creed's program, or I listen to Gus's program, I listen to Mr. Williams' counter-racism.com, or I read Mr. Fuller's book. It really just can't be that. You really have got to figure out a way to be active, to be productive, meaning producing something that is an attempt to counter what white people are doing. That's really got to be a core part of counter-racism. We got way too many spectators. Way too many spectators. And in my opinion, spectating, if you're a non-white person and you're just spectating with regards to racism and white supremacy, you are helping white people. You got to be actively doing something to work against racism and white supremacy. Like I said, it doesn't have to be, out stomping up and down in the street or getting a gun. You can write, you can blog, there's tons of things you can do. I would even say just making a consistent effort to try and get family and friends that are around you. That counts too. If all of us, if we made an effort, we're going to get every family member and we fail, but we at least get 2 family members who are less confused, that would be phenomenal. And I suspect that would dramatically improve our quality of life. If everybody out listening to my voice right now, if you had 2 family members that you could talk to who understand racism, white supremacy, core aspects. We are the system. White people are the problem. You can't be non-white and be rich. Just core fundamental thing. No sex with white people. If you had 2 people in your family, immediate family, that you could talk to that had that understanding, I suspect 90% of the non-white people listening, that would drastically improve their quality of life. White people are not going to make that happen. That's something we're going to have to do. So be active. That's the call was saying in Massachusetts. Be active. Really make sure you're investing that time and energy to get this information out because we desperately need it. Let's see. Yes, sir.
Just want to say something. I just wanted to echo on what you were saying about being productive. Exactly. You're right on point about that because one pattern that I have seen, right, in all the so-called areas in the world where the people decide, hey, you know what, we're not going to work for you white supremacists, right? What these group of non-whites do, it's like, well, we're not going to work at all. And that's wrong. Because if you're not working, white supremacy works nonstop. So sooner or later they're going to get to you no matter what. And that's one of the behaviors that our people, they end up, acquiring. They be like, okay, I'm not going to work for white people, so that means I'm just going to become a bum. I'm just going to be on the street corner, kicking the bobo and, give me a 40 ounce and talk about the white man. That's not doing nothing, because now you just, like you were saying, that's what I'm saying. I'm agreeing 100% with what you're saying. Now they're unproductive. They're not doing nothing. What I mean by, stop cooperating with them, stop working for them, work for your people. But one problem that we have, though, because I have tried that already, and I'm still working with some non-whites. I actually work, and I'm investing a lot of time. So I do graphic work and things of that nature. I do book covers and things like that. But one of the things, that's one of the things that we do wrong. I'm not going to work for them, so I'm just going to become a loser. I'm just not going to work. That's not fixing the problem. You're not working for them, but you work for your people. You know what I'm saying? You can't stop working and being unproductive. You got to keep working, keep moving. You know, a lot of our people do that, man. You see them in the street corner outside a liquor store. Yeah, I don't work for the white man, but I'm out here drinking and throwing my life away. I'm a wine on my way, you know, to become a crackhead, you know, and I'm talking about the white man. That's not doing nothing, you know. So I agree with you 100% what you're saying about, you know, one has to be productive. Yeah, also I wanted to point out, one of the problems we have is that in the business world, in the world of commerce, our people still are very shysty, because when you go out there and do business with non-whites, most of the time what you're going to find somebody who's unprofessional, who is shysty, might try to rob you. You know, our people still are, we have some of those, but not too many of those. People who are honest, are loyal, are have a certain thing of professionalism, humanity, you know, that they can do business honestly with our people, because most of the time you go out here and you be like, yeah, man, this is a brother, man. He got a company. Yeah, I'm going to work for him. Next thing you know, he's robbing you worse than the European. You know, we got to watch out for that, too. Peace, guys. Love you, brother.
Good to hear from you, sir. Caller in Massachusetts. I found that website, too, with the racist jokes. Resist.com. Resist.com. The Earl, if anybody... if you want to check it out, they have a lot of material you can study. White supremacist jokes, www.resist.com. And then you can just click on it. It has like nigger jokes and Asian jokes and, you know, the whole gambit. Resist.com, www.resist.com. I'll share 2 racist jokes before we sign off. We're at the 3-hour mark. The 2 that I saw that I thought would be interesting to ponder on. I'm just pointing this one out. They also had the joke about how do you stop a nigger from drowning? Take your foot off his head. They have that one on their site too. Let's see. 1, what do you say if your TV is floating in the middle of the night? Drop it, nigger. Second joke. What do you call 20,000 niggers floating in the sea? An oil spill. Commentary from Racist Man and Racist Woman. I'll also make sure that I point out our guest, Dr. Jane Hill, white woman. It's codification. I have seen this happen 3 or 4 times now, so I'm having to assume that this will work for counter-racist code. If you are interested in getting a white person to share racist jokes with you, and you ask them, and they've admitted, oh yeah, I've heard some, and most white people, they'll admit that, oh yeah, I've heard some racist jokes, and they say they don't want to share them, they act like they're getting shy, or, you know, they're scared that you're going to get upset. I've seen it work 3 or 4 times now. You start telling racist jokes, they will then share. If they see you share 2 or 3 of them and you're not wigging out and acting crazy, you just, you know, see, this racist joke, boom, give them another one, give them another one. I've just seen invariably, they will put their guard down and say, oh, I can share some of my racist jokes too. I don't know what that is, but I've seen it. It's worked for me at least 3 or 4 times. Anyone out there, you're interested in racist jokes, just have a few that you've memorized. Get like 3 or 4, memorize them, you share a couple. I've just seen consistently the white person will open up. With that, as I said, we'll be back on Wednesday, November 23rd. November 23rd, Bruce Baum. He'll be on the program discussing his brand new book. The term racy, I think Justice asked a question about that term and what does it mean. I, of course, was thinking that such a term certainly could be related to racism, white supremacy, and I'll just read you the dictionary definition before we close out. The dictionary definition of racy, R-A-C-Y, racy, R-A-C-Y, an adjective of speech, writing, or behavior, lively, entertaining, and typically mildly titillating sexually. Also showing vigor or spirit, having a characteristic quality in a high degree. I'll just go back to the first one. Lively, entertaining, and typically mildly titillating, sexually racy. Gus definitely thinks that is related to racism. Thank you all for tuning into the program. CynicalAfrican.wordpress.com. Excellent blog with lots of information on the trifling terroristic antics of racist man and racist woman. Also, Cree's blog, Cree7.wordpress.com. Cree7.wordpress.com. They're both investors. Cynical African, he posts daily on my Facebook page. Lots of information and super supportive. Appreciate all of the contributions on the Facebook page and any other assistance from victims who listen to the program. Again, we'll be back on Wednesday with another white person. Have your questions ready. And as we've been saying consistently, minimal counter-racist effort. You can, at minimum, make a prayer to the Creator. Please help us deal with, destroy these white people. In fact, we can close out with a prayer. Never thought we would have a C.O.W.S program end with a prayer. We will close out. This will be just a spontaneous prayer to seek assistance in crushing white people. That's something easy that we could all do, and I just have to assume because of our conditioning and white Jesus, we just haven't been asking the Creator to help us get rid of white people. Maybe if more of us are doing this, that help will be accelerated. Watch the happening. We can make that happen. Closing out, assuming that the Creator is not racist, white people have caused us a variety of pain, suffering, and trauma worldwide. This system of injustice and terrorism has been going on longer than I know. If you are out there and you can give us some assistance, anything we can do to help this process along to get white supremacy out of here, totally destroyed, final resolution to this problem, anything that we can do, let us know. Communicate that to us. Let us know behaviors that we need to change. Anything, let us know, and please give us as much help as you possibly can. I'm sure we're capable of doing a lot more. I know we're capable of doing a lot more. We have been intensely confused and victimized. I'm sure we have just neglected or forgotten a lot of the gifts that we have that we could be using to improve our lives and probably to deal with these white people. Just give us a little help, more focus, more clarity, and any assistance that you can offer, please. I know you have got to have been watching the conduct of these white people worldwide. It is a disgrace. It's a disgrace not just to all forms of all people that are on the planet. It is a total disgrace to the planet. Everything, the plants, the animals, even the squirrels. White people are an enemy and have trashed everything. Please help us get rid of white people. Please. If you're not a racist, any help that you can offer, thank you. And if there are things that we need to be doing to help move this process along, please let us know. Give us a sign, anything to help us change our behavior to make this happen. Please help us get rid of white people. Thank you. Pray that the Creator will help destroy and get rid of white people. We'll be back on Wednesday.